In the silent hours before dawn, a subway cleaner found a baby alone on a cracked vinyl seat. Tiny fists wrapped around a worn brass medallion older than the station itself. Police flooded the tunnels, chasing a ghost mother who seemed to move where cameras could not follow. But as Detective Lena Harper dug deeper, the story unraveled into secret safe rooms, decades of forgotten workers, and a love so fierce it risked everything to protect one small life. Who was the woman who vanished into the dark? And why did she trust strangers with her child when the city had failed her? Before we continue with this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as we have a special story that'll be released soon. The first sound was steel, a long, aching shriek that ran the length of the tunnel as the 542 local ground itself to a halt. Its brakes bit into the tracks and sent up sparks no one saw because the fluorescent lights inside the car flickered just then, turning the world into pale gray stutter. A few early riders looked up from phones and paper cups, waiting for the usual routine. The sigh of doors, the gust of stale air, the voice that always said stand clear. Instead came a different sound, soft but sharp enough to make every head lift. It was a cry, thin at first, not much louder than the squeal of wheels cooling against the rails, but alive in a way the machine noise wasn't. It wavered once, caught, then built into something uneven and urgent. The people who boarded at Stillwell Avenue, an old man in a navy pea coat, two nurses with hospital badges swinging, a messenger with an empty bike bag. Went still as if listening to some warning built into the concrete. No one moved at first. That's the city's reflex. Pause, measure, decide whether to help or to fade back into anonymity. The car itself seemed to hold its breath, lights humming, doors standing open to a platform that was nearly deserted at this hour. It was too early for crowds, too late for the last of the night stragglers. Just a half dozen people, and the sound of a baby somewhere down the length of molded plastic seats and scratched windows. The messenger shifted first. He took one hesitant step, peering past the standing pole, eyes adjusting to the dim rear of the car where shadow pooled near the coupling door. Another cry answered him, small lungs straining, raw enough to cut through train noise and tunnel echo. The nurses exchanged a look, the kind you learn on overnight shifts. This is bad, but we're going. They started forward together, shoes squeaking on the rubber floor, their pace slow, but committed. When they reached the midpoint, they could see it, a bundle, gray blanket with worn edges, set neatly on a long bench seat where nobody ever sits because the heater vents rattle there. The bundle moved. A tiny arm kicked free for a moment, then curled back in, fingers clenching something so tightly the knuckles were pale. The cry broke, became hiccups, then silence heavy enough that everyone behind them stopped breathing. One nurse knelt. The other stood watch. "It's okay, baby," the kneeling one whispered, as if the child could hear past the roar of train life. The old man in the pea coat edged closer, his face folding into something soft and frightened. Nobody asked whose baby or why. The air already knew something was wrong. A bag? No bag. No car seat. No bottle. Just a blanket and the small shape under it. Somewhere far up the platform, a public address speaker crackled with routine delay warnings. The sound felt distant, irrelevant. The messenger reached for the emergency intercom and pressed a red square. His voice shook when he said it. There's a baby alone in car 2437. Send somebody." As if on cue, the doors shut themselves and locked, the operator protecting the scene, or the system doing what it does. Lights steadied. Everyone present stood together now, an impromptu circle around the smallest passenger on the train. In the lull, before sirens or uniforms or authority arrived, the city was just people again, strangers bent toward a cry that should not have been alone. The baby stirred and gave a single soft whimper. The fingers flexed, still wrapped around something metallic that glinted once in a harsh overhead light. No one touched it yet. No one dared. They only knew they were waiting for help, and that something about the way the child clutched that object, like it mattered, like it belonged, made the air shift colder down the length of the car. Jamal Reyes had been pushing his mop down the platform for almost an hour before he saw the bundle. His shift started long before dawn, when the tunnel still held the night's stale heat and the air carried a sour cocktail of steel dust, wet newsprint, and coffee grounds poured out from forgotten cups. Cleaning wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and after 15 years of scrubbing city trains, Jamal knew every hum and echo those cars made. That morning the sound that reached him wasn't mechanical. It was soft and human, curling out from the last car like steam. He slowed without meaning to, eyes narrowing toward the open doors. The train was waiting on the track with its hazard lights blinking. Some signal fault had delayed dispatch. Jamal would normally use the pause to sweep litter and check for spills. Instead, he heard it again, a ragged little cry that didn't belong in an empty subway. He stepped up into the car, boots squeaking on the gritty floor. The lights flickered once overhead, settling into their usual cold buzz. Seats ran the length of the car, graffiti scratched into plastic, one ad hanging loose on its metal frame. And halfway down, against a grimy window, something small shifted under a gray blanket. Jamal's first thought was homeless rider crashed out, but then the cry came again, higher, wet, desperate. He moved closer, careful, the way you approach a stray animal that might startle. What he saw made his stomach dip. Not a man, not a woman, just a baby. Tiny, maybe 9 months, maybe a year. Cheeks blotchy from crying, nose running, fists balled tight against its chest. He looked up fast, scanning the car. Empty. No diaper bag slumped in the corner. No stroller. No exhausted parent napping 2 seats away. Only the child and the low throb of the tunnel beyond the doors. Jamal's heart kicked against his ribs. This wasn't in any safety manual. He crouched slowly, palms out like he might to calm a scared kid. "Hey, now," he said, voice gentle but shaking at the edges. The baby startled but didn't scream, just stared at him with wide, dark eyes. Jamal saw then what the little hand held. Something round and tarnished, brass maybe, heavy for fingers that small. The object caught the fluorescent light and flared dull gold before the child tucked it back against its chest like a secret. Jamal fought the urge to snatch it away, to check if it was sharp or dangerous. He knew better. Sudden moves might make the kid wail, or worse, drop whatever it was and hurt itself. Instead, he slid his radio from his belt and pressed the call button with a thumb slick with sweat. "Dispatch, this is Reyes on track 4, he said, keeping his voice low. "Got an unattended infant in car to 43-7. Need MTA response and PD." His words felt too small for the sight in front of him. The dispatcher came back fast, clipped, awake now. "Reyes confirm? An infant." "Confirmed," Jamal said, eyes locked on the baby. No adult visible, just the kid. The train hummed beneath him like some restless beast waiting to move. But the signal fault had it pinned for now. Good. He didn't want this car going anywhere until help came. He kept talking soft nonsense. "Easy, baby, you're okay," though he wasn't sure either of them believed it. Minutes stretched. A gust of cold air swept the platform, carrying the first scent of morning, coffee, ozone, city grit. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell, and Jamal exhaled when he saw orange vests and the dark blue of transit police spill onto platform. Officers move with that fast, contained stride of people who know bad things happen when you wait too long. "Here," Jamal called, lifting one hand but not stepping back. "It's right here." 2 officers boarded, one a woman with her hair tied tight, the other young and watchful. They took in the scene, him kneeling, the baby still clutching that odd metal token, the utter emptiness of the car, and something hard flickered across their faces. The young cop's hand hovered near his radio. The woman's eyes softened, but only for a second. Then she was all business. "Sir, step back," she said gently but firmly. Jamal obeyed, retreating to the doorway, heart still running ahead of him. As they approached the child, he saw the thing again, catching the overhead light. Brass, old, edges worn from decades of touch. Not a toy, not anything he'd seen a baby hold before. "Got him," the officer said quietly, lifting the tiny body into practiced arms. The baby whimpered. Not quite a cry now, just confusion and exhaustion. The token stayed in his fist. Even the cop didn't try to take it. Jamal stayed where he was, mopping hand forgotten, watching as they radioed for EMS and backup. The empty car felt heavier now, full of questions with no answers. Whoever had left this child had known the system well enough to vanish. Whoever they were, they'd left behind silence and a strange piece of metal that didn't belong in any child's hand. The first uniform to climb into the car was Officer Talia Moran, boots thudding softly against the rubber matting. Behind her came a younger partner, Morales, scanning corners with the brisk, alert eyes of someone new enough to be cautious, but seasoned enough to know how quickly a routine call can turn. The infant sat where Jamal had found him, blanket slipping from one tiny shoulder, cheeks flushed from crying but quiet now, breathing shallow, watchful. It was a stillness that struck Moran most. Babies don't usually go quiet for strangers. She dropped to a knee a few feet away, lowering herself until she was small and unthreatening. "Hey, sweetheart," she murmured, hands open and palms forward. The little fist flexed once, and that's when she saw the glint. Not jewelry, not a toy. Something heavy, brass maybe, about the size of an old silver dollar but thicker, edges dulled by decades of touch. It flashed dull gold under the cold fluorescence, then disappeared back into the child's palm like a secret. Morales leaned closer to see, brow furrowing. "What's he got?" Moran shook her head just enough to answer, but kept her voice calm, quiet. "Let's not spook him. Radio EMS and child services." She inched forward on her knees, moving slow, letting the child smell the faint leather and detergent in her jacket. "It's okay, kiddo. You're safe now." But when she reached out, the baby's fingers only locked tighter, tiny knuckles going pale around the token. His eyes, huge and dark and glassy, followed every inch of her hand. Moran stopped just short of touching him. She'd seen neglected kids, scared kids, but this grip was something else. It wasn't reflex. It was insistence. Babies drop things. This one hadn't. Whatever that disc was, it mattered to him. Behind them, Jamal hovered in the doorway, mop forgotten. "Been holding that since I found him," he said softly. "Wouldn't let go when I got close." Moran glanced up. Her expression said she'd heard but couldn't answer yet. She turned back to the child, noting details as her training demanded. The token was about 2 inches across, stamped on one side with letters too worn to read, and on the other an outline of something. Maybe wings? A wheel? Years of sweat and friction had polished it to a dull glow. No sharp edges, thank God, but clearly not something sold in baby aisles. Morales keyed his radio. Unit on scene confirms infant, no guardian present. Object in hand, unknown origin. The words hung heavier than they sounded. In this city, unknown origin could mean lost jewelry or something that pulled entire task forces out of bed. Moran tried again, whispering low, coaxing fingers with her gloved hand just close enough to feel the warmth radiating from that tiny palm. The baby's lower lip trembled, but he didn't cry. He just held on, gaze flicking between her and the door as if expecting someone else to peer. The radio crackled with incoming chatter. Backup en route. EMS clearing security. Child services notified. A voice from command asked for description of the object. Moran gave what she could, short and steady, watching the baby the whole time. On the platform, more boots approached. Heavier ones this time, transit detectives moving fast. Detective Lena Harper was among them. Her coat unbuttoned and hair pulled back with rubber band like she hadn't planned to be called this early. She stepped inside and went still. Her eyes found the child, then the metal. "Show me," she said quietly. Moran moved aside. Harper crouched until she was level with the tiny face. No sudden movement, just stillness that felt deliberate, the way some people talk to frightened animals. "Hey, buddy," she murmured. "That yours?" The baby blinked. Harper's gaze swept the token. In her head, gears turned. She'd seen brass like that before, long ago in a missing person's file, in evidence bags marked with the old Transit Authority seal. A worker's medallion? No, those had numbers, but this one looked altered. Some faint etched marks around the rim, nothing standard. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, she looked up at Moran and Morales. "Don't force it. Photograph it in place. We need gloves and a protective bag when he lets go." The baby shifted, a soft sigh escaping, and clutched the medallion tighter. Tiny arm trembling with the effort. Harper's chest tightened. Someone had put that in his hand for a reason. Behind her, radio traffic picked up talk of locking the platform, pausing train flow, rerouting commuters. But in the silent center of car 2437, it was just a detective, the officers, the cleaner, and a baby whose entire world seemed to fit into one fist. Moran finally spoke, voice hushed but certain. That's not a random trinket. Harper's eyes stayed on the child, on the polished edges catching cold light. No, she said. Someone wanted him found, and wanted this found with him. The baby blinked once more and, just for a heartbeat, seemed to relax, as if hearing something none of them could. The token gleamed faintly between his fingers. No one moved. The weight of it, whatever it was, wherever it came from, filled the car as surely as the sound of the rails and the endless dark behind the glass. The call went out fast, faster than most. One moment, the car was just a strange scene lit by cold fluorescent glare. The next, it was a point on a citywide network of alarms and radios. A supervisor somewhere at Transit Command heard the phrase abandoned infant with object in hand and didn't hesitate. Every lever of the system began to grind into motion. A clipped voice broke through the radios carried by the officers in the car. Code for on track 4. Lock it down. Repeat. Lock down track 4, Station Delta. The language was dry and procedural, but the meaning was immediate. Somewhere above them, a dispatcher flipped a switch that sent signals racing through control panels. The digital boards at platform level went black, then blinked to red with service delay. Police activity ahead. Within a minute, the faint electric whine of approaching trains dulled and died. The tunnel beyond the car, normally alive with echoes, fell into an unnatural quiet. Drivers held its signals up the line would be frowning, tapping their comms, wondering what could freeze an entire track at dawn. Officer Moran felt it first. The shift in air pressure as ventilation fans rerouted, and the low hum of rail power ebbed to standby. We're sealed, she murmured to Harper without looking up from the baby. At platform level, Jamal watched men in dark jackets and orange vests swing into motion with an efficiency that only shows up when something serious happens underground. 2 transit cops began stringing yellow barrier tape across the stairs, hands moving quickly but faces calm. Another keyed his shoulder mic and directed an incoming train to bypass. Commuters who'd been trickling down stopped short, confused at first, then uneasy as the meaning settled. Something big was happening. Track 4 is closed. Please proceed to alternate service. An amplified voice announced from the ceiling. The PA system flattened all emotion, but the echo carried a sharpness that sent shivers up the spine. Inside the car, Detective Harper stood just behind Moran and Morales. She was steady but alert, eyes scanning every rivet and seemed like they might hide a threat. She'd done bomb scares, unattended bags, even an infant once before, but never with an object like this. She reached for her own radio, voice low and precise. Command! This is Harper. Infant secure, breathing steady. Unknown item still in possession. Request EOD consultant Child Services ETA. Copy, came the reply, crisp through static. Bomb squad notified. They'll advise. That single phrase, bomb squad, traveled the car like a cold draft. Jamal felt it in the doorway and had to remind himself to breathe. Nobody thought the little thing could hurt anyone, but the city didn't gamble. Not with brass discs no one could name. Morales checked the platform through the scratched window. Transit officers were keeping the space clear, waving back curious eyes and impatient commuters. He saw one man try to push through the tape. An officer's open palm stopped him before he got 2 steps. EMS finally appeared, green jackets and rolling kit bags. They paused just inside the tape perimeter, waiting for clearance. One medic caught Harper's eye, and she gave the smallest shake of her head. Asterisk, not yet. Not until the kid's hand opens, or we know what we're dealing with. Asterisk. Command's voice came again, filling the uneasy quiet. Harper, status of object? She studied the tiny fist still curled tight, the edge of brass visible where sweat had made it shine. Still secured by subject. No hazard indicators, but age and markings unknown. Repeat unknown. Copy. Maintain containment. Bomb squad inbound. The word containment hung there. This wasn't just about rescue anymore. It was about control. Harper hated the pivot, but recognized it. The baby had gone from victim to possible risk because of whatever history clung to that token. On the platform, Jamal leaned against a steel pillar, mop forgotten, watching as more uniforms poured in. Transit Bureau, Emergency Service Unit, 2 men with heavy packs and instruments slung over their shoulders. The mood shifted further. Quieter, slower, more deliberate. Back inside the car, Moran spoke softly, almost to herself, but loud enough for Harper to hear. Poor kid. Doesn't even know the whole city just stopped for him. Harper didn't answer. She was thinking about whoever left the child here. Whoever chose this early hour, this half-empty car, and tucked that token into his tiny hand. They'd known the system well, where cameras failed, when trains paused long enough, how to disappear. Above them, power fully dropped on the track, with a final pop of distant relays. The silence afterward was deep and electric, as if the city itself were holding breath. Harper crouched again, steady and slow, bringing her face close enough that the baby could smell the soap on her collar, hear the quiet promise in her voice. "You're safe," she said, not sure who she was trying to convince. "We've got you." The child shifted, eyes half closing, and for a heartbeat Harper thought the tiny fingers might relax. They didn't. The medallion gleamed once in the cold light, and then disappeared back into his grip. Outside the car, boots and radios and guarded voices moved like distant thunder. The whole of Track 4 belonged now to that one small hand, and the question locked inside it. Detective Lena Harper came down the service stairs alone, boots finding each metal tread with the patience of someone who'd learned long ago that rushing only burns time. The station below her was already transformed. Commuters held back behind tape. Transit cops spaced like sentinels, the smell of ozone and damp stone riding up from the tracks. She moved without hurry, but with the kind of presence that parted space for her. At 47, she had the tired eyes of a career built in missing persons, eyes that had scanned too many alleys, too many basements, and still found people when others said there was no hope. She paused at the bottom of the stairs to take the scene in whole. Track 4 sat dead silent. Power killed. Train held mid-platform under hard fluorescent lights. Officers shifted their weight, but kept voices low. On the edge of the platform, a transit cleaner, tall man with salt creeping into his beard, leaned against a pillar like someone trying to become invisible. Harper's gaze lingered there. Witness. First on scene, maybe. She stored his face away without words. Moran met her halfway down the platform, relief showing but controlled. "Detective," she said quietly. "Baby stable. Still got whatever that thing is in his hand." Harper nodded once, not wasting breath. "Show me." The car door groaned as she stepped inside. The temperature felt different, warmer from bodies, but with that strange hollow hush you only get when a train is sealed and waiting. At the far end, Morales stood guard while an EMS medic crouched nearby, but hadn't touched the child. The baby sat propped on a folded jacket, wrapped again in the gray blanket someone had found. He wasn't crying now, just wide-eyed and exhausted, a little island of silence amid the radio static. Harper moved closer until she was level with him. She didn't speak right away. She let him look at her. Children, even this young, sense charge and speed. She'd learned that work in the lost kid cases. You come in loud, and they retreat. You come in steady, and they sometimes lean forward. After a long beat, she let out a small breath and said, almost conversationally, "Hey, little man." No reaction, but no fear either. That was good. She lowered herself into a crouch. The knees protested, but she ignored them, scanning what mattered. Pale cheeks, cold nose, but no visible injuries. Hands, one tucked in, the other locked tight around the brass disc. She leaned closer just enough to catch its edges. Brass, yes, but old, stamped with a partial logo worn to ghost marks. Someone had polished it at some point. Around the rim she saw faint scratches, deliberate but hard to read. "Don't try to take it yet," she told the medic without looking up. "Didn't plan to," he replied softly. She took out her phone and shot quick photos, close enough for detail but without flash. Then she stood and gestured Morales back a step. "Let's clear some noise," she said. "Too many radios, too much crowd energy for a frightened infant." Moran gave a subtle hand sign, and the rear door slid shut. Outside, boots shuffled but voices dimmed. The quiet that followed let Harper think. She'd seen tokens like that in old case files, employee medallions used by subway workers decades back. But those had clear numbers and union markings. This one looked altered, etched with something newer, maybe initials or symbols. And it was warm. She could tell just by the sheen in the baby's sweat-slick fist. Someone had given it to him deliberately. A talisman or a key. She turned to Moran and Morales. Chain of custody starts now. Nobody takes it from him until we have gloves, evidence bag, and high-res shots. If he drops it on his own, fine. If not, we wait until we're safe to coax it. Morales nodded, scribbling quick notes on his pad. Harper straightened and scanned the car, letting her mind run backwards through how a child ends up alone here. Cameras miss things, especially in the older stations. There are blind spots where a body can pass unnoticed if they know timing and angles. Someone had known. The placement was careful. Last car, heater bench, early hour before real rush. Whoever left him didn't want him hurt. They wanted him found, but only after being sure of something. She walked to the doorway and looked out toward the cleaner, who stood exactly where he'd been. "You Reyes?" she asked. He startled, nodded. "Yeah, Jamal. Good eyes. You touched the kid?" "No, ma'am. Just looked. Called it in." "Good. Stay close. I'll need your first impressions later." Back inside, the baby stirred, a small whimper slipping out. Harper returned quickly, dropped back to her crouch, and hummed low. Not a lullaby, just a human sound to fill the empty space. The tiny body relaxed a little. The fist stayed shut. She studied the medallion one more time and felt the slow pull an old instinct. The one honed chasing ghosts and runaways across years of unsolved cases. This wasn't random. Someone had walked miles of tunnel to place this child exactly here and arm him with something meant to speak for them. Harper rose, eyes sharp now. Let's get full perimeter. Cameras, track access, any unauthorized key logs in the last week. And tell bomb squad we need non-intrusive first. I don't want him prying it loose while he's awake. Outside the car, the radios came alive again as orders rippled outward. Inside, Detective Lena Harper stood still for a moment longer, listening to the faint, steady breathing of the boy and the faraway echo of a city adjusting to a mystery it didn't yet understand. The room they used for feed, review wasn't meant to comfort anyone. It was narrow and windowless, walls lined with racks of equipment humming faintly. Screens stacked 3 high, casting cold light on everyone's faces. Detective Harper leaned against the table instead of taking a chair, arms crossed as a transit tech, Mei Chun, keyed through video files one after another. Somewhere behind them, the baby slept in a medic's arms, wrapped and safe for now, but here the work turned sterile and digital. May had pulled every camera covering track 4 in the adjoining corridors for the past 2 hours. The playback rolled in silent, grainy black and white. The train pulling in. The handful of commuters stepping off, shoulders hunched, heads down. A lone man with a guitar case. A woman with a rolling suitcase. Nothing unusual. Then the waiting period, long minutes of static empty platform, while the train sat dead from the earlier signal fault. "Freeze there," Harper said quietly. May tapped the keyboard, and the image stilled. Empty bench. The heater grate just visible. Time stamp. 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 11 seconds. May answered. Next frame's at 12. Standard refresh on this angle. She advanced 1 click. The gray vinyl seat that had been bare now showed the bundle. Blanket slightly rumpled, unmistakable small shape tucked inside. No adult, no stroller, no blur of motion. 1 frame, empty. The next a baby alone. Morales cursed under his breath. That's impossible. What? They teleported him. Frame rate's low, May said, though her own voice betrayed unease. This camera's ancient. 1 frame per second, if we're lucky. If somebody knew the timing. They could slip in between. Harper finished. She stepped closer, studying the pixels until her eyes ached. No stray shadow, no half-seen arm. Whoever did this had either found a perfect blind moment or knew exactly how the system blinked. Moran leaned forward, elbows on knees. Checked the other angles. May was already there, flicking through feeds. A stairwell cam with salt haze across the lens. A side platform cam showing Jamal pushing his mop long before he heard the cries. A wide shot of the car doors standing open in silence. Each one told almost nothing. At 4 hours, 52 minutes and 10 seconds. Clear, empty. At 4 hours, 52 minutes and 12 seconds. The bundle there. Just there. Rewind. Harper said, 10 seconds back. They watched again, slower. No one approached. No flicker of movement. No trick of light. Just a cruel cut from nothing to something. Harper exhaled through her nose, long and thin. They timed it, knew the feed delay. That's not chance. May's hands hovered over the keyboard. I can check maintenance logs. Anyone with access could have slowed refresh rate, maybe spiked a reboot window. Do it, Harper said. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd chased ghosts before, runaways who vanished between cameras, abductors who knew how to become invisible. But this felt sharper, almost surgical. In the doorway, Jamal shifted, uneasy at the quiet. So you're saying somebody planned it? They knew where to stand. Harper looked back at him. They didn't just know where. They knew how. This isn't a panicked parent dumping a kid. It's deliberate placement. She returned to the monitor. May had pulled another feed, one that looked across an older service corridor where wiring hung exposed. The same timestamp. A flicker at the very edge, maybe a code hem, maybe just artifact. Harper's heart beat faster for one beat, then slowed. Too fuzzy, could be anything. Save that clip, she said anyway. Morales muttered. Someone's been under here before. Knows blind corners better than we do. Former transit? Contractor? Moran guessed. Harper didn't answer. Her mind was already running through the old missing persons cases that brush against the subway system. Runaways sheltering in maintenance rooms, janitors who disappeared into forgotten tunnels, the ones the city stopped talking about. And tokens. There'd been tokens once, worker medallions that opened doors long sealed. May broke the silence. No heat bloom either. If someone dropped a kid, they weren't on thermal for at least 30 seconds before or after. Harper nodded slowly. Whoever carried that baby came and went like a shadow, left nothing but an impossible cut in the feed and an infant holding a piece of the past. She felt the familiar chill she always did when the city seemed to tilt, when ordinary rules stopped applying. Archive every second, she said finally. Isolate all cams within 50 yards and upstream stairwells. Pull service records for any offline sensors. She straightened, rolling her shoulders back. And get me a list of anyone with old key access. Start with maintenance retirees. Someone used knowledge we don't teach anymore. Behind her, the medic shifted the sleeping baby slightly. Careful not to disturb the small fist still clenched tight. The token gleamed once in the fluorescent light, as if winking at the monitors here, but not giving up its story yet. Harper watched it out of the corner of her eye. Whoever left this child behind had moved like smoke through a system built to watch everything. Now the city itself was trying to catch up, stitching digital footage into a narrative that simply wasn't there. And she knew from long experience that when you start with blank space, the path to answers gets dark fast. Alan Morse came in from the cold, still wearing his engineer's jacket, streaked with the fine gray soot that lives in the tunnels. His face carried the worn calm of someone who'd been on rails for 3 decades and had seen just about every kind of trouble a train could throw at you. Brake issues, stalled cars, a drunk asleep across the doors. But when Harper asked him to walk her through his morning, that calm thinned just enough to show a crack. They sat on a bench just off the platform while cameras kept rolling and texts whispered over the feeds. The baby slept in another room. Officers floated by in quiet rotation, a soft hum of radios marking time. Harper kept her voice low, gentle enough to draw him out. Start from the first odd thing, she said. Alan rubbed his palms together like he was warming them. Signal fault about 450. Nothing new there, systems old. But it hit in the curve before track 4. Yellow flickered to red, then back, like a bad Christmas light. Made me tap the brakes and crawl the last quarter mile. You stopped early? Slowed. Didn't want to stall. In the bend. Got eyes on the next block. Track looked clear, no worker scheduled, no debris. But then he trailed off, brow furrowing under the brim of his cap. Then I saw someone. Thought I saw someone. Harper didn't fill the silence. Long coat, hood up, dark, could have been black or navy. They were between cars 4 and 5, riding the coupler. He gave a small, almost embarrassed shake of his head. You don't ride there. Not unless you know what you're doing. You're sure? I've been driving 31 years, he said quietly. I know the difference between a shadow and a fool with a death wish. I swear to God someone was there. What happened? Next blink, gone. His hands open and close as if he were trying to catch the memory. I slowed more, hit the horn once. Nothing. Checked my mirrors. Even rolled the cab window to listen. Just tunnel echo and metal on metal. Harper leaned forward a fraction. Time. Right before the fault cleared. 4:51, maybe 52. She glanced toward May, who hovered nearby with a tablet. May was already scrolling, cross-checking with the video stamps that showed the baby appearing at 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 12 seconds. Could you describe build? Height? Harper asked. Alan exhaled. Couldn't swear it. Tunnel's dark. Lights back there are garbage. Looked adult, not small. Medium height. They moved like they belonged. He grimaced. Balanced easy. Most folks would wobble, maybe fall. This one just turned and slipped off like the dark took him. Harper's pen scratched quick notes. No flashlight. No. Just a glint. Maybe metal at the waist, tool, or hook, couldn't tell. Moran stepped closer. Could they have boarded from a maintenance alcove? Alan's jaw shifted side to side. There's an old service door before the curve. Been locked for years, but if you had a master key, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Harper looked up sharply. You ever seen anyone use that door? Not since early 90s. Used to be for track repair gangs. Got sealed after fire. She let that hang. The weight of 3 decades forgotten keys and sealed maps. Alan rubbed his face with both hands. When I pulled in, I scanned cars like always. Didn't see no kid. Just empty seats, graffiti. Figured my eyes were playing tricks. And the figure, gone by then, like they melted into wall. Silence pressed in for a moment, filled only by the low thrum of equipment and distant platform noise. Thank you, Harper said finally. You did right slowing down and calling the fault. Alan gave a short, humorless laugh. Didn't stop him, though. Whoever was knew the blink spots better than me. He looked up, eyes suddenly sharp and haunted. Detective, if they can ghost a kid onto my train without me catching it, they can do a lot worse. Harper didn't contradict him. Instead, she stood, offered a steady hand to help him rise, and signaled for May. Mark that service door. Pull its maintenance history. We'll need access logs from the last 6 months, paper and digital. May nodded, fingers already flying over her tablet. Alan lingered, reluctant to leave. You'll find them? We'll try, Harper said, the way only someone honest does. He tipped his cap and headed up the platform, shoulders still square but slower now, as though the rails he trusted his whole life had shifted a little under his boots. Harper watched him go, then looked back toward the sleeping child beyond the door. The timeline was tightening, a flickering signal, a ghost between cars, a baby appearing out of nothing. Someone had threaded every second with precision, and she hated how clean it was. Let's go see that service door, she said quietly, and the team moved, boots echoing down the tunnel that suddenly felt much longer and much older than the city above remembered. D'Angelo Lopez took his time before touching the thing. Years working for the NYPD's forensics unit had taught him that haste was how you missed the story an object wanted to tell. On a steel table under bright white lamps, the medallion lay where Harper had finally placed it after the baby's fist slackened during a gentle sleep. She'd waited until the child was warm and breathing slow, then teased the tiny fingers open just enough to slip the token free. Even then, she'd handled it like something alive. Lopez bent over the table, broad shoulders hunched, glasses sliding down his nose as he adjusted the focus on a portable scope. The piece was heavier than he'd expected when she handed it to him. Dense, cool against a latex glove. He rolled it once with the tips of his fingers. Brass, no doubt. That old, deep yellow glow that doesn't fade no matter how much grime the city gives it. The first side was straightforward enough, or it would have been decades ago. A circular stamp, faint but legible under magnification. New York City Transit Authority. The font belonged to another era, the blocky kind used when tickets were still punched by hand. Around the rim ran numbers that would once have been crisp but were now worn to shallow ghosts. He jotted them down anyway, 73 to 409, then frowned. The last digit had been scored through at some point, scratched over until only a shallow gouge remained. He flipped the disc and felt his stomach tighten a little. The second side didn't belong to 40s. Not officially. Someone had etched new marks across the smooth back. Not random scratches, but deliberate arcs and dots. Under the lamp, thin grooves caught light like whispers. "Someone's been busy," Lopez murmured. Harper stood behind him, arms crossed, watching without comment. He adjusted focus again and traced the etching with a gloved fingertip just above the surface. For small circles set in a line, each bisected by a slash. Between them, an arrow pointing counterclockwise. Along the outer rim, a series of tiny hash marks like teeth. It wasn't art. It was information. He looked up. The base piece is legit. Subway worker medallion, circa early 40s. Back then, each employee had one. Acted like an all-access badge before we had digitals. They were serialized, tied to paper ledgers. If you had one of these and keys, you could move anywhere below street level. Moran leaned against the doorframe, listening. So somebody had Grandpa's keys? Maybe Grandpa himself, Lopez said, or someone who found his medallion and decided to adapt it. He tapped the new markings. This isn't decorative. Might be directional. I've seen similar on homemade maps. You use scratches like these to remember a sequence of doors or turns. Harper's eyes sharpened. Code. Feels that way. He pointed to the crossed-out number. This part bothers me. Whoever altered it didn't want the original assignment traceable. Scratch the serial so you can't track the last registered owner. May had joined them quietly, tablet in hand. I ran a quick query on medallion numbers, she said. Most records at old are paper only, but 73 to 409 would have been issued out of Coney Island Yard. Senior track maintenance. Name? Harper asked, still digging. Digitization spotty that far back. Lopez returned to his scope, tilting the medallion until a faint oil sheen surfaced on the brass. This wasn't pocket junk. Somebody kept it clean, oiled even, to keep it from corroding. They wanted it usable. Usable for what? Morales asked from the corner, where he'd been quiet until now. Locks, gates, service doors, Lopez said. Even if most were changed, a handful of antique access points still take these. Old ones never fully sealed. They're just forgotten. He glanced up. If you knew where to try it, you could ghost hole stretches of track. Harper felt the chills settle deeper. So, whoever left that baby had a road map under the city and wanted you to know it, Lopez added. Why else leave the kid gripping it? Harper looked at the medallion one more time, thinking of the cameras that had blinked at the exact right second, the signal that had stuttered just long enough to stall a train and create a quiet space. This wasn't luck. Someone with deep, old knowledge had threaded a safe path into the modern system. Lopez slid the medallion into a labeled evidence pouch, sealing it with a deliberate press of tape. I'll get it under better scopes back at the lab. We can 3D map the etching, see if it's coordinates or text. Maybe find trace skin cells under the patina. Chain of custody tight. Harper said automatically, though her voice was lower now, thoughtful. Lopez nodded, logging the handoff with a stylus. When he left, carrying the small sealed pouch like it might change something, the room felt briefly emptier. Harper stayed by the table, staring at the imprint left behind on the stainless surface, a faint circle of condensation from cold brass warming in gloved hands. Someone had reached backward through 70 years of the city's veins, pulled a relic out of history, and used it like a key to place a child where only ghosts could. Harper felt the weight of it settle into her chest. This was no accident and no simple abandonment. Whoever had done this had planned every breath of the morning. And somewhere, maybe still in the tunnels, they might be watching to see if the message in brass was understood. The briefing room smelled faintly of stale coffee and damp wool. A half-circle Transit Authority brass filled the space. Some in navy jackets with the MTA patch, others in plain suits that didn't disguise their irritation. They weren't used to having their system breached, and they liked it even less that the breach had been clean enough to make them look blind. Detective Harper stood to one side, shoulders loose, but she was reading every flicker across their faces. At the head of the table sat Deputy Operations Chief Victor Carlin, square jaw working like he was chewing stone. He'd started as a trackman himself in the 80s and wore his past like armor. His voice came out low but cutting. You're telling me someone got an infant onto an active line using a key we phased out half a century ago? Yes, Harper answered without apology. Medallion dated to the 40s. Modified. It opened something it shouldn't. Across from her, a security administrator named Feld shook his head. Those doors are sealed, welded in some places. You need schematics nobody has. Somebody has them, Harper said. They walked in and out like it was nothing. Carlin cut a look at Feld to silence him. Then to Harper, you think it's one of ours? I think it's someone who once was. Or someone who learned from them. Your own logs are Swiss cheese before 1970. Keys got lost, doors got bricked but not welded. You know that better than me. Carlin's jaw shifted. He did know. For decades the system had been patched, modernized in pieces, but there were still miles of service corridors, and used stations, abandoned junctions no one had the budget to monitor. There were legends among old crews about the back veins, paths you could take clear from one borough to another without ever surfacing. Most people laughed those off. Today, no one was laughing. A woman in a gray blazer, Internal Security Chief Dana Ibarra, tapped her pen sharply against her tablet. We've got enough trouble with trespassers and urban explorers. If word gets out that someone exploited a legacy key, we'll be answering to the mayor's office before noon. It's already out, Harper said quietly. Train was locked, track shut. You've got commuters with phones. They saw police carrying a baby. There's footage. A groan went around the room. Ibarra swore under her breath. So, public story? Simple, Harper said. Found child. Investigation ongoing. Do not get cute about details. The more you deny, the more people dig. Carlin rubbed at his forehead, then dropped his hand and stared at the table's scuffed surface. We've still got old medallions floating in attics. Retired guys keep them for souvenirs. Family keepsakes. We've begged for returns. Nobody listens. Then start listening harder, Harper said, and find your last known holders. One of them, or someone close, just made you look wide open. Feld bristled. You want us to interrogate retirees? Half of them are in Florida. I want to know who still had a master set and access to plans. You're not hunting random hobbyists. You're hunting someone who understands blind spots and timing. May, quiet until now, cleared her throat from the wall where she'd been taking notes. I've started building a list from partial digitization. Anyone who signed medallions out from Coney Island Yard, pre-1960. It's slow but doable. Carlin gave a curt nod. Do it. Quietly. I don't want panic about secret doors hitting the post. Harper felt the temperature in the room, a mix of embarrassment, anger, and real fear. For years, the MTA had built its public face on modernization. Cameras, patrols, sensors. The idea that someone with knowledge older than those systems could slip past and plant a child under their noses was an insult they didn't know how to swallow. A younger security tech piped up from the back, voice hesitant but clear. Chief, should we audit physical seals? Some of those doors. Yes. Carlin barked before the man finished. Every unmonitored hatch from here to Brooklyn. Welds, locks, whatever's still open. Ibarra turned to Harper, eyes narrow. And NYPD's theory? Why leave a kid? Harper didn't blink. Message. Someone wants us to see they can move anywhere. And maybe they want the kid safe, not harmed. That gave the room a long pause. The idea unsettled more than angered. There's something worse than sabotage when it's careful and purposeful. Carlin exhaled like air from a brake line. We'll cooperate. But if this turns into a media circus— It already is, Harper said, not unkindly. Best thing you can do is get ahead of your own skeletons. Don't wait for a blogger to map your forgotten doors. The room sat heavy after that. Outside, the muted rumble of resumed trains sounded distant but fragile, like a heartbeat returning after shock. Carlin finally stood, and the rest followed. You'll have what you need, he said, voice iron now. I want my railroad sealed. As they filed out, Harper remained by the table a moment longer, listening to the echo of boots and knowing how big the gap was between what they promised and what the tunnels really held. She glanced once more at the evidence bag lying nearby, the small brass disc mute and patient. A piece of the past had walked through their defenses, and the city above was only beginning to realize how porous its veins could be. The knock on the observation room door was soft but deliberate. Detective Harper turned and found a woman framed there in the dull hallway light, short, compact, hair pulled into a neat twist at the base of her neck. A badge swung from a lanyard across her navy cardigan. Marisol Vega, ACS Emergency Response Unit. She didn't push into the room. She waited until Harper gave a small nod. Morning, Marisol said, voice calm but edged with fatigue. Got the call. Infant male, no guardian. You ready for transfer? Harper gestured toward the far side of the room where the child lay swaddled on a folded fleece. EMS had checked vitals. Warm now. Hydrated with tiny sips from a dropper. Small belly finally quiet after the long cry. He looked more like any baby might after a hard morning, except for the alert way his eyes flicked between faces. Watching. Learning. Marisol set her bag on the table and knelt, movement quiet and unhurried. Harper noticed the way she softened her shoulders, how she spoke first not to them but to the boy. Hey there, little one. I'm Marisol. We're going to take care of you. Okay? No scary stuff. The baby blinked, slow, cautious. She unpacked a soft carrier, a spare onesie, a small bottle. Every action measured, practiced. You could tell she'd done this before, probably hundreds of times. Still, Harper saw the faint tightness in Marisol's mouth when her eyes landed on the evidence bag sitting on the nearby tray, the brass medallion sealed behind clear plastic. That is? Marisol asked quietly. Harper nodded. Was. We took it while he slept. Needed to process it. How'd he take it? Harper exhaled through her nose, remembering. Didn't cry. Just went still. You know that look kids get when you take their anchor? Like the world got wider all at once. Marisol's expression softened, but her hand stayed busy tucking the blanket snug. We'll keep him grounded. What's his status? No ID, no prints match, no leads yet. We're calling him Track 4 Infant in the report. Marisol glanced up sharply, something like disapproval in her gaze. That's not a name. It's a placeholder, Harper said, but quietly. She understood the sting. When Marisol finally lifted the baby, the shift was immediate. His body curled tight against her chest, tiny fists searching for the shape that had been there before. Without the medallion, he seemed smaller somehow, less sure. He pressed his face into her collarbone and stayed very, very quiet. Not calm exactly, but withdrawn. Marisol adjusted him higher and rubbed a slow circle between his shoulder blades. Hey, little man. New smells, huh? New arms. You're okay. Her voice was warm but unyielding, a lullaby built from confidence, not false cheer. The baby didn't respond beyond a small sigh. Harper watched, arms crossed, feeling a pull she couldn't quite name. She'd seen 100 removals, but this one sat strange. Maybe it was the planning behind his arrival, the silent calculus someone had done to put him exactly where he'd be found alive. Maybe it was the way he had held that token like a message too old for words. You'll take him to Midtown? Harper asked. Temporary intake first, Marisol said. Medical exam, warm bath, new clothes. Then emergency foster until we know more. She glanced at the evidence bag again. I'd like him to have something. Not that, she nodded to medallion, but something to hold. Familiar weight matters. Harper understood. She rifled in her coat and came up with a small cloth doll, forgotten until now, a giveaway from a precinct toy drive she'd stuffed in a pocket weeks ago. Plain cotton with a stitched smile. She passed it over without comment. Marisol accepted it, brushed it lightly against the baby's cheek. His tiny hand groped, closed around with weak but certain fingers. The tension in his shoulders eased by a fraction. "Better," Marisol murmured. "We'll keep this close." Before leaving, she looked Harper square in the eye. "I'll keep you updated. He's safe now, but he's also alone." Harper's throat tightened, though her face stayed neutral. "Do what you can." "I will." The medic cleared the doorway for her, and soon Marisol was gone down the corridor, baby tucked firm against her chest, small cotton doll clutched in a new fist. The silence after their exit felt heavy and strange. Moran spoke in the corner, low. "Feels wrong, taking him from the only thing he had." "It's evidence," Harper said, but softly. She wasn't sure who she was convincing. On the table, the sealed medallion caught light again, a dull gleam like an eye half closed. Harper stared at it for a long moment, aware of the cameras, the waiting supervisors, the entire machine of the city grinding back to motion overhead. Somewhere out there was a person who had known exactly how to slip past all of it and still care enough to leave a child alive, and a brass message clutched tight. Harper let out a breath and turned back to the growing case file. Whatever came next, the tunnels had just whispered a story older and stranger than anyone in this room wanted to admit, and a baby without a name was the only witness. The surveillance room had grown quiet enough that the machines themselves seemed to breathe. Banks of monitors hummed softly, their light washing the gray walls in restless flicker. Machen hadn't left her chair for hours. Her eyes were red-rimmed from scrubbing footage, pausing, rewinding, enlarging. Detective Harper hovered nearby, coat slung over a chair, but body still poised for movement, drinking black coffee gone cold. May had been patient. She knew how often the answer hides not in the obvious, but in the seams between frames. The baby had materialized at 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 12 seconds on every known angle. They had already mapped the dead seconds, the stuttering feed, but nothing felt satisfying. Only holes where something human should have been. Now she hunched closer, face inches from one of the older feeds routed through an analog converter. Camera 12, an antique position at a bad angle. More for liability than safety, its glass streaked from years of grit. She'd nearly skipped it earlier because of the haze, but something tugged at her to run it again. She rolled backward 20 seconds from a key moment and pressed play. Grainy static crawled across the screen. Empty bench, empty door, flickering fluorescent overhead. Then, at 4 hours, 52 minutes and 10 seconds, a faint shimmer. Almost nothing, like the camera coughing on its own feed. May leaned closer. It was a person, or part of one. She hit pause, then advanced frame by frame. In the dull gray bloom of low resolution, the outline formed slowly. A figure half turned away, long coat falling to mid-calf, but shadowing the face. No colors, just ghost gray on gray. Both arms bent forward, and there, May's heart stumbled. Something small pushed ahead, low to the ground. Not a stroller. Smaller, more like a box or carrier on wheels, but the angle warped detail. She caught her breath and whispered, "Got you?" Harper was beside her in an instant. "What?" "Here, camera 12. May tapped the screen. "Look." Harper bent over her shoulder, squinting. The image was lousy, but once your brain adjusted, the shape emerged. The woman, it felt feminine though nothing was clear, braced her arms as if nudging something gently toward the seat where the baby would peer. Then, 2 frames later, only coat and hood as she turned. Another frame, nothing but empty air and the faint hint of movement toward the service alcove just outside view. "Freeze," Harper said. May froze it and dialed magnification, though the picture broke apart into jagged pixels. Still, the silhouette was there, unmistakable now. One knee bent slightly, the hem of the coat flaring like she'd just pivoted. A gloved hand, pale against the dark coat, resting on the object before slipping away. "Shadow into the alcove," May whispered. "Timestamp?" Harper's voice was hushed tight. 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 9 seconds to 11. Harper swore under her breath, right before the bundle pops into frame on the main feeds. They watched it 3 more times, each replay deepening the unease. The figure never showed a face. The coat was generic, the hood drawn far forward. No identifiers, just the impression of care, the push, the pause, a hand lingering 1 beat longer than necessary. Moran came in mid-watch and stopped dead. That her? Someone, Harper said. Someone who knows exactly where the cameras end. May nodded, fingers already flying. Camera 12 doesn't report to Center Security. It's on an old analog loop. Quality's trash, but it's off-grid enough they might not have planned for it. Print it, Harper said. Freeze on the hand on the carrier. May did, but the image degraded to blocks of gray and black. Still, the arc of a wrist, a thumb. There if you wanted to believe it. Can we trace where she went? Moran asked. May shook her head. She heads toward a blind corridor. No coverage until the modern cameras resume 50 yards out. Nothing picks her up. Harper stared at the static figure a long time. It was something and nothing all at once. Proof a person had been there. Proof deliberate placement. But also proof of how practiced she was. Entering and vanishing between the city's mechanical blinks, like a tide slipping back into a cave. She straightened slowly. Archive every version. Don't enhance beyond integrity. We can't afford to taint it. She glanced at May. Good work. May didn't smile. She knew we wouldn't see. She didn't count on you, Harper said quietly. For a long moment the room stayed still, everyone staring at the pale outline of the woman on the screen. The hood hid everything. Hair, face, identity. But the posture was unmistakable. Protective, deliberate, like someone saying goodbye in silence. In the hallway outside, a door slammed and radios muttered about press gathering topside. Inside, Harper felt the city tighten another notch. They had a glimpse now, no more than that. A phantom mother or courier sliding through forgotten arteries of steel and concrete. And somewhere in those tunnels, the answer still moved, just out of reach, watching whether they'd learn to follow. The map smelled faintly of dust and machine oil, the scent of something that had been folded and refolded by hands long gone. Detective Lena Harper laid it out across the metal table in the small operations room the Transit Authority had given her as a base. The paper cracked softly as it opened, edges curled and browned. Ink faded but still legible under the harsh overhead lamp. A red stamp in the corner read property of New York City Board of Transportation, 1941. Everyone in the room leaned in unconsciously. Moran Morales, May Chun with her tablet, and 2 older MTA supervisors who had been reluctantly coaxed down from their offices. The modern city ran on digital schematics, clean lines and neat overlays, but what Harper had unrolled was older than their careers. A breathing thing, alive with half-forgotten passages and symbols no computer recognized. Harper smoothed a palm across the creases, careful not to tear the fragile vellum. We can't follow someone if we don't know the ground they're standing on, she said quietly. And they're not standing on our maps. The supervisors exchanged a look. Carlin, the operations chief, frowned and muttered, "Those are obsolete." "Obsolete until this morning," Harper replied without looking up. "Whoever left that baby knew these tunnels better than we do. They rode blind spots, dodged every modern camera, and used an access medallion from the 40s. That means they were walking this." She tapped the paper with one blunt finger. The blueprint showed a network far denser than anything the team had been referencing. Sidings abandoned after the war, loops built for trolleys that never ran, workmen's closets marked by small cross keys. There were faint pencil notes in the margins, initials, dates, measurements, left by some long-ago engineer. In the bottom right corner, a sequence of symbols eerily similar to the scratches on the medallion. Little circles bisected by slashes, an arrow curling counterclockwise. May crouched closer, tracing the marks with a gloved fingertip. "Here," she said, pointing to a section near Stillwell Avenue Yard. "This loop doesn't exist on current schematics, but the medallion etchings, they match this curve." Harper nodded. "And there's the service door Allen mentioned." She followed the faint line to a square labeled Auxiliary Maintenance Access 17B. According to the digital system, 17B didn't exist. Carlin sighed, rubbing his jaw. Sealed in the 70s after a fire. Sealed, Harper repeated, or just welded shut and forgotten. Big difference. She leaned over, pencil in hand, marking possible pathways in clean strokes. They likely entered here, she said, circling 17B. Move along the defunct trolley-spurred Track 4 service corridor. 2 blind cameras. 1-minute window before the next eastbound. Moran blew out a slow breath. So they didn't just walk in. They rehearsed. Or they were born to it, Harper said. This isn't amateur exploration. It's heritage knowledge. Someone learned from an old hand, maybe family, maybe one of those retired names we're chasing. May was photographing each section, layering the analog with her digital tablet to build a hybrid map. We can't scan all of it right now, she murmured. Paper's too fragile. But I can overlay the main lines and blind spots. Do it, Harper said. She stayed hunched over the blueprint, eyes narrowing. The map felt like a secret whispered across decades, the city's veins drawn before surveillance, before turnstiles remembered every swipe. She thought about the baby's tiny fist, the old brass polished smooth, the scratches encoding directions for anyone who knew how to read them. Whoever orchestrated this had walked the same ground she was touching now, maybe with a lantern in one hand and a child in the other. See this? Harper said suddenly, stabbing at a tiny unlabeled hatchway. Leads to a ventilation shaft under Track 4. Perfect vantage to watch the car without showing up on platform cams. Moran swore softly. That's how she saw us. She saw everything, Harper said. Carlin shifted uneasily. We've let this rot too long. Yes, Harper answered, voice cool but not unkind. And now someone's using your ghosts. For a moment, no one spoke. The map sprawled between them. An entire other city below the one everyone thought they knew. Somewhere in those narrow, damp arteries, a woman in a long coat had walked unseen, left a child alive and vanished. Harper finally rolled the edge of the paper back. But not all the way. She didn't want to lose the sense of it, the tactile reality. We'll mark every possible exit. Cross-check with your maintenance logs and May's camera grid. We'll close the gaps one by one. May glanced up from her tablet. You think she's still down there? Harper looked at the ghosted pencil lines, the little circled keys and forgotten notations. If she wants to be, yes. Outside the door, a train rumbled somewhere, its vibration a distant heartbeat through the concrete. Inside, the group stayed clustered around the old blueprint, like people reading an oracle. Harper's hands rested flat on either side, anchoring it to the table. She felt the age and the weight of every mile of tunnel, and also something stranger, a grudging respect for whoever had outplayed the modern city, with nothing but memory and a piece of brass. Let's hunt the map she's using, Harper said finally, eyes hard again, because right now she's 3 steps ahead. Luis Ortega arrived leaning on a cane polished smooth by years of use, his transit jacket faded but clean, the patch at his shoulder almost colorless from sun and soap. They had reached out quietly through the union's retiree board. Harper had asked for anyone who remembered the old keys and hidden doors. Luis had answered with a short call and a voice that sounded amused but curious. Now he stood just inside the operations room, eyes wandering over the evidence photos pinned to cork and the unrolled blueprint spread like a living thing across the table. He smelled faintly of tobacco and linseed oil, and when he took the offered seat, he sank into it with the slow care of a man who knows his knees aren't what they used to be. His face was lined but alert, dark eyes sharp even under bushy brows. Harper, who had learned to gauge people in seconds, felt a quiet steadiness about him that matched the tunnels themselves, worn but enduring. You're the detective, he said, voice rasped but warm. City called me in to talk ghosts? Something like that, Harper answered. We got someone moving through places most of us forgot exist. They used one of these. She slid the sealed evidence bag across the table. Inside, the brass medallion winked dully. Luis let out a soft grunt. Haven't seen one in years. He didn't ask permission. Just lean forward for a better look. Hell, we used to call those bones. Your bones got you anywhere. Before swipe cards and cameras, you just flash that at a gate and men wave you through. You had one, still got it somewhere. His smile was quick and sad. Don't work no more, I think. But back then, if you were track crew, you had to get to spots nobody mapped. Fires, leaks, breakdowns. The city's like a body. You need surgeons who know where to cut. He tapped the scratched side with a gnarled finger through plastic. But this part's new. Someone marked it. Directions, maybe. 4 dots. 1 arrow. Could be levels or doors. Harper leaned forward. Tell me about the doors. Luis chuckled low, but faded quickly. Too many to count. When I started in 71, older guys showed me shortcuts. Service hatches behind advertising panels. Stairwells locked from the public side, but open with a medallion on the other. There were lockers, too, old workmen's closets. We'd stash tools, warm clothes. Some still down there, if they ain't flooded out. Moran asked, sealed. Luis shrugged. Sealed enough to keep tourists out. But a man with the right key and map could open half of them. They didn't weld every hinge. Sometimes they just painted them shut, figured no one would bother. Harper glanced at the blueprint. Would a kid know? Luis snorted. No, you had to learn from somebody. Apprentice style. Father to son, uncle to nephew. We didn't write it down. Not safe. His eyes softened for a moment, but folks did pass it on. He leaned closer, voice dropping. I remember 17B. Carlin, lurking in the corner, stirred at that. That hatch was supposed to be closed after the 77 fire. Luis gave him a look that made the room hush. Supposed to be, I locked it myself once, but they never welded. Just slapped a sign and walked away. We used it years later, when pumps failed. If someone had this bone and knew where 17B was, they could walk right into Track 4's back veins and pop up unseen. Harper's jaw tightened. That's exactly what happened. Luis sat back, exhaling. Then you got someone old school. Not a kid with a crowbar. Somebody who learned the city from the inside. Would they hurt a baby? Morales asked quietly. Luis looked over at him, long and thoughtful. Not likely. Folks who know the map respect it. If they put a baby somewhere safe and visible, that's on purpose. You leave danger deep, you bring safety to light. Whoever did this, they wanted the kid found, not lost. The room went still with that. Harper studied the old man's face, the steadiness there. If you had to guess who still has a bone that works. Luis shook his head. Hard guess. Old timers died. Some keys handed to family. Some sold as souvenirs at flea markets. He hesitated, then added softly. But some families kept them quiet. Pride thing. My own father said never toss the bone. It proves you belonged. He pushed the medallion gently back across the table. This one's been loved. Somebody oiled it. Somebody trusted it to still open doors. That's knowledge you can't Google. Harper thanked him, meaning it. Would you mark the spot you remember? She slid a printed overlay of the blueprint forward. Luis took the pencil with surprising steadiness and began adding small excess. Each mark was another ghost lane through the city's dark belly. When he finished, he looked up with a weary half-smile. There's your hunt. Might be chasing somebody who knows as much as me, maybe more. Harper met his gaze and felt the weight of what he'd given her. A map not just of tunnels, but of inheritance, loyalty, and secrets that outlived official records. Somewhere down there, someone had used that legacy to keep a child alive and hidden until the right moment. And now Harper had a thread to follow. The message from the forensics lab came in the middle of the slow afternoon, when the case board was beginning to feel stale. Harper was standing with one hip against the table, sorting through Luis Ortega's hand-drawn marks on the blueprint, when May's phone buzzed with a distinctive tone, reserved for priority lab results. May glanced down, eyebrows climbing, and handed the device over without a word. Harper read twice before saying anything. Partial prints, she murmured. That alone wasn't unusual. The medallion had changed hands over decades. But then she said it louder to the whole room. They're not the babies, And not maternal line, either. Moran looked up from her laptop. Not the woman on camera? They wouldn't know yet, no face to match. But listen to this. Harper read the line again, slow enough for the syllables to carry weight. Partial match. Missing persons, 1989. Case 47 to 2217. Subject, Gloria Vega. The name hung there for a beat, heavy and uninvited. May frowned. Vega. Same surname as Marisol. Morales said, voice quiet but pointed. Harper's eyes flicked up sharply. Common enough in the city, but yeah, worth noting. She looked at May, pulled a file. May was already digging into the digital archives. Much of the late 80s was scanned badly, full of crooked type and photocopied photos, but she found it. A report stamped closed / presumed deceased, but not solved. Gloria Vega, 22 when last seen. Address in Sunset Park. Last contact early spring of 89. Pregnant, no known father. Vanished after a night shift at a diner. Harper studied the grainy photo on the screen. Young woman with solemn eyes, heavy coat unbuttoned just enough to show a round stomach. There was something haunting her face. Not fear exactly, more defiance caught halfway to sadness. She was 6, maybe 7 months along here. May said, family reported her missing after she left work and didn't come home. File says unstable living situation, possible domestic trouble. Body ever found? Moran asked. Never. Harper tapped the edge of the screen with a finger. So either she disappeared into those tunnels or someone helped her vanish. Morales swallowed, still staring at the photo. Could this baby be hers? Math's wrong, Harper said quickly but softly. She didn't want the hope to get ahead of them. Gloria would be in her 50s now. Could be descendant, though. Daughter, granddaughter. May scrolled through the scanned report. Mother at the time was Rosa Vega. Address still in system. Alive and in Queens. Harper's thoughts clicked together. The medallion once tied to a maintenance crew, a pregnant woman in 89, a vanished line of Vega women, and now a baby with no digital footprint, carrying a piece of brass scrubbed clean except for her partial print. She turned to Moran and Morales. Quiet door knock. We talked to Rosa Vega before the press does. Carlin shifted from the corner where he'd been listening. You think this is a family handoff? I think the tunnels keep secrets for families who know how to ask. Harper's voice was firm but low. And someone left us breadcrumbs with this medallion. Moran eyed the sealed evidence bag, with a token rested under its label. Lab sure about the match? Sure enough for preliminary, Harper answered. Sweat oils don't last 30 years, but brass keeps a ghost print if someone loved enough, held it enough. This medallion's been handled by Gloria Vega more than once. May added softly. They found trace cosmetics too. Old-style foundation. Ingredients phased out in the 90s. That's why they ran the database. Harper felt a strange stirring she hadn't allowed herself all week. Something like a thread finally tugged free. The baby wasn't dropped by a stranger. He came from a line that had been moving under the city for decades. Tell the lab to preserve everything, Harper said. No contamination, no rebagging. She stared at Gloria's face on the monitor, young forever in that grainy photograph. If she's gone, someone kept her alive through this child. If she's not, Harper didn't finish. The thought was too raw, too impossible to stake yet. Moran broke the quiet. What do we tell child services? Nothing more than we know, Harper said. They need the baby safe. We need the truth safe. She pushed away from the table, rolling her shoulders as if shaking off years. Let's go see Rosa Vega. Outside the windowless room, the station rumbled back to life. Trains grating past on live tracks again, announcements blaring. But inside, the little group stayed still a moment longer, all eyes drawn back to photo and the gleam of brass under plastic. A vanished woman's fingerprints had reached across 36 years to place a child into Harper's hands. The city's forgotten map was no longer abstract. It had a name, a face, and maybe, finally, a reason. Harper picked up her coat. Bring the medallion. If Rosa Vega knows this story, she's going to know that bone. And with that, she was moving, quiet but charged, as if the case had suddenly shifted from a search for shadows to a search for living memory. The air changed as soon as they stepped beyond the bolted service gate. It was cooler there, a damp mineral breath rising from the city's underbelly, and every sound came back doubled. Boots on cracked concrete, the faint shuffle of paper debris, their own breathing. Harper went first, flashlight held low to keep from blinding her own night vision. Behind her came Moran and Morales, and then May carrying a small tablet glowing just enough to track their path against the scanned blueprint. The corridor they'd chosen matched Luis Ortega's pencil marks and the faded lines on the old map. It had once been an auxiliary track spur, built for trolleys that never ran, then abandoned and walled off. Paint peeled in long curls from the ceiling, and ancient tiles lined the walls in pale, watery green. Here and there rats skittered into shadows, claws whispering over grit. Somewhere deeper, a slow, steady drip of water tapped the silence like a clock. Harper paused at the first junction. The ceiling opened above into a black ventilation shaft. Their lights caught damp steel rungs leading up to nowhere. Dead end topside, Moran said quietly, checking her notes. Sealed street hatch. Harper nodded and moved on. She wasn't looking for exits yet. She wanted to feel the path itself, the one someone had walked recently with a baby small enough to cradle and an old medallion in hand. Every so often she stopped, eyes sweeping the floor for prints or scuffs. The dust told stories if you were patient. Faint impressions of boot soles, a smear where something had been dragged. They turned down a narrower side hall, and the smell shifted, older and closer. May's tablet pinged softly. "We're crossing under track 4 service vein," she murmured. "This is where camera 12's blind spot begins." Harper's jaw tightened. She closed her eyes a second, and the baby's cries seemed to ghost through the passage. Memory only, but so clear she half-turned before catching herself. It was how trauma worked. The sound of that first wail had threaded itself into her. Morales shivered and muttered, "Feels like somebody's still here." "Stay sharp, but stay quiet," Harper said. Farther in, the corridor widened to a low chamber with remnants of a break area. A sagging bench, a cracked locker door hanging by one hinge, rusted thermos lids scattered across the floor. Luis had said there'd be closets. He was right. Harper swept her light over one open locker and saw initials carved deep in the metal. GV 1989. She stilled. "Look." Moran leaned over her shoulder. "Gloria Vega?" "Could be coincidence," Harper said, though her voice had gone low. Inside the locker, long forgotten, lay a strip of cloth hardened with age and something like chalk marks along its edge. A scrap of ticket stub, so brittle it flaked under breath, bore a date blurred but still legible. APR 89. May whispered she was here. Harper touched the edge of the metal with her glove. And maybe whoever carried the baby came back to the same ground. They moved on, quieter now, like intruders in a memorial. The corridor sloped gently downward, into thicker darkness. Rails appeared, two thin steel lines half buried in dust, leading to a brick wall. Wheels had rolled here once. Harper imagined the screech of them, imagined a young woman pushing deeper into safety 3 decades ago. At the wall they stopped. Someone had etched fresh marks in the tile, for dots and an arrow curling counterclockwise. The same code as the medallion, fresh enough that when Harper brushed it with her glove, chalk dust came away faint and white. "Not 30 years old," she said softly. "Whoever left the baby walked right here." Moran's light shook just a little. "They're watching. Or guiding," Harper murmured. She couldn't tell which thought chilled her more. They stood there a long minute, breathing the damp air, aware of the weight of decades and footsteps layered under theirs. This was a place between worlds, half tomb, half lifeline. Somewhere close. Trains groaned and commuters cursed delays. But here the city felt abandoned except for ghosts and someone clever enough to move among them. Harper finally turned away. "Document everything. Photos, grid coordinates. And mark that locker. Evidence team needs a hole." As they retraced their steps, the echo of their own movement followed, sometimes oddly doubled, like another set of feet just beyond reach. Morales kept glancing back. May held the tablet close to her chest. Harper kept her flashlight steady. though a part of her half expected a figure in a hood to step into view at the next bend. When they climbed back up through the service gate and into the light of modern electric panels, the world felt louder and thinner, like surfacing from deep water. Harper didn't say what sat heavy in her mind, but it showed in her eyes. There were lives still moving below, memory mapped into tile and dust, family secrets folded into the arteries of the city. And someone, somewhere in those shadows, had chosen to trust her team with a child, but not with their presence. "Seal the access, but keep it quiet," she told Moran and Morales as they latched the gate. "We know how she got in. Doesn't mean we found her." Above their heads, the ceiling trembled faintly as a train passed, the old rails humming a low, secret chord. Harper thought of the baby's first wail, the glint of brass, and the chalk marks left for anyone willing to listen. She didn't know yet if they were chasing danger or help, but she knew the map was alive, and someone had just whispered back. The passage narrowed until their shoulders brushed cold tile, and the smell turned dense with rust and something faintly sweet, the ghost of old baby powder, or maybe just imagination tugged loose by exhaustion. Harper led the way, careful with her footing on the uneven concrete. They had returned deeper than before, following the faint chalk signs, small curls and dots tucked in corners like someone had left breadcrumbs only for those who already understood. At first the alcove looked like nothing, just another cut in the wall, where workers once stashed cables in buckets. But the light from Harper's torch fell across a shape that didn't belong. Fabric, a dark green sleeping bag curled against the far curve of the bricks, zipped halfway and sunken with age. Around it, someone had tried to make a home. Morales drew a slow breath. God. Milk bottles, 6 of them, sat lying along one edge of the wall, glass dull but unbroken, each with a cap taped and retaped until it looked like a child's craft. One still rattled with something dry inside when Moran nudged it gently with a gloved knuckle. Beside the bottles lay a tin box of powdered formula decades out of date, its paint flaking to exposed steel. Harper crouched, scanning slowly. "Don't touch more than we have to." Next to the sleeping bag was a small toy train, the kind that once circled Christmas trees. Chipped red engine, one car missing a wheel. Dust had dulled it, but the paint still shone faintly where little hands must have worried at it long ago. And above the nest, taped to the tile with brittle, yellowed adhesive, hung a fan of photographs. May stepped closer with her tablet light, turned low and gentle, capturing each image without disturbing them. The photos were Polaroids mostly, some creased in near disintegration, others better preserved. Faces stared back. A young Latina woman with dark hair and wary eyes. The same woman later cradling a swaddled newborn against her chest. A subway tunnel behind her, laughing a little despite the setting. One picture showed a man's arm but not his face, just a sleeve of MTA Navy, and a brass medallion glinting at his belt. Another held what could only be Gloria Vega, unmistakable from the missing persons file. The coat, the eyes, the sadness that had hung there even on paper. Harper felt the air thicken. This wasn't just debris. This was memory anchored in brick. She lived down here, Harper whispered. Or hid, Moran said softly. There were other things. A baby rattle melted a little from heat. A small composition notebook with the first pages gone, but faint pencil on the later ones. Half grocery lists, half notes like stay quiet, wait for signal, keep bones safe. The words slanted and faded, but the intent lingered. Morales knelt by the sleeping bag, reverent without touching. She made a place for him, or for herself. Harper's chest tightened. The baby above them, safe now with Marisol, had roots here, a lineage of survival in forgotten arteries. And whoever placed him on that seat must have stood in this very spot, breathing the damp, seeing the same photos taped to the tile. May swallowed hard. These photos, they span years. Look, different film stocks, different clothes. She came back. Harper studied the oldest picture again. Gloria's arms tied around an infant who couldn't be the child they'd found, but perhaps his mother or his grandmother. Threads across time. A family using the tunnels as refuge, sanctuary, maybe escape. Moran said quietly, she left him where we'd find him, but this is where they lived. Harper straightened slowly, spine stiff but voice soft. Bag it carefully. Photos first. Catalog everything in sequence. This is a family's map, and we're trespassing on history. They worked in near silence. Crime scene lights muted to preserve the fragile paper. Morales slid evidence sleeves under each photograph like lifting pressed flowers. May documented with clinical precision, but her hands shook. When they uncovered the bottom of the pile, one last Polaroid emerged. A newborn sleeping in the same green sleeping bag. A brass medallion tucked under its chin. Date scribbled in marker, March 2nd, 23. Harper's throat caught. That's him. Morales let out a long breath. So whoever his mother is, she was here just months ago. The idea shifted everything. The woman on camera at 12 wasn't just a shadow, but someone continuing a tradition begun decades earlier. Harper looked around the alcove one last time before signaling the team to withdraw. The place fell wholly in its own rough way, not sanctified by religion but by endurance and care carved into neglect. Against a city that forgot, someone had built safety with scraps and silence. As they stepped back into the corridor, Harper glanced over her shoulder. The photos still hanging looked back through time, witnesses stubbornly alive. She thought of the baby's wide, quiet eyes when Marisol carried him out. He hadn't wailed then, just watched. Perhaps he had known all along this was no ordinary rescue. It was the next chapter of something built in secret and love under tile and steel. Seal this chamber until evidence finishes, Harper ordered softly once they were beyond the chalk marks. Then we'll bring the family what's left. They've lost enough. No one argued. Behind them, the sleeping bag shrine stayed in the dark, holding its stories like the tunnels always had, patient and sure the city above would never fully understand. They laid the photographs across the long metal table, one by one, under the cool hum of the evidence room lights. It had taken the better part of an hour to clean the grime gently from each corner and press them flat under plastic sleeves. Harper stood with her palms on either side of the spread, shoulders rounded but eyes sharp, following the silent story frame to frame. Most of the pictures have been simple glimpses, babies swaddled, faces turned away, tunnels half-lit by weak bulbs. But the seventh one stopped her cold. It was Polaroid stock, edges curled and browning. The chemical colors faded to soft brown and sea glass green. The shot was casual, caught mid-movement. A young woman leaning against a tile wall somewhere far below, chin tipped slightly down as if listening. She wore a long coat unbuttoned enough to show a dark sweater and the gleam of brass at her throat. Not just a key or trinket, the medallion. Same diameter, same dull sheen, hanging on a chain like a medal. May noticed Harper's pause and came to her side. That one's different. Photograph number 7, Harper murmured. Her thumb brushed the protective sleeve, tracing the brass circle caught by the Polaroid's light. The woman's hood had fallen back in this image, hair dark and heavy over one shoulder. The resolution was poor, but her profile was strong. High cheekbones, steady gaze, a mouth set firm but not unkind. Even blurred by time, she felt alive and eerily familiar. Moran came up behind them, reading Harper's face. Same coat. Harper nodded once. Near enough, and look at the height. Build. This could be the woman on camera 12, just decades younger, or her twin. Morales leaned over, squinting. Dated. May turned the photo slightly. Someone had scrawled in blue marker across the back edge. April 1989. Silence pressed in. They all knew what else happened in April 1989. The date on Gloria Vega's file. Harper exhaled slowly. She's wearing the bone. She knew its value. Gloria herself? Moran asked. Could be, Harper said. But if so, she didn't die when the file closed. She went under and kept living. Her voice stayed calm, but a current of something electric moved under it. Or, this is Gloria's daughter, born in those tunnels, carrying on the map. Hairline similar, but we can't confirm. May tapped her tablet. I can run face approximation against the missing persons database, but with a Polaroid this degraded, low odds. Do it anyway, Harper said, and compare the woman's silhouette from camera 12. Morales swallowed. If it's the same bloodline, then that baby is part of it, Harper finished. She stared longer at the photo, imagining the moment had been taken. Someone else must have been behind the camera. Another pair of hands who knew these routes. Maybe a partner, maybe family. A life built down here in secrecy, yet with tenderness. Photos, toys, a sleeping bag shrine. And now, after all that silence, a child handed up into the daylight like a message. We are still here. Moran broke the quiet. Why keep taking pictures? Isn't that dangerous? Harper's mouth tightened. People want to be remembered, even in hiding. She gestured to the toy train bag nearby. Even in the dark, you build a record. Somebody down there wanted this story to surface eventually. May swiped to pull up the faint body scan from camera 12 beside the Polaroid. Side by side, it was uncanny. The slope of shoulder to hip, the flare of the coat, the hand's angle. I'd say 70% match just on geometry. 70's enough to chase, Harper said quietly. Moran looked at the brass disc under its tag. Then the medallion we pulled off the baby wasn't just a key. It's a signature. Harper nodded once. It's the family crest. It's saying we made it this far. For a while they only listened to the city moving faintly above them, muffled trains, distant voices. The photo seemed to radiate its own quiet pulse, linking their fluorescent-lit room to that other world of damp tiles and love fought for in secret. Finally, Harper reached for a fresh evidence sleeve and slid the seventh photo inside with deliberate care. We don't know yet if Gloria Vega survived, but someone did, and someone wants us to know that medallion still opens doors. She straightened, eyes clear now. Get this image and flag for cold case. And find Rosa Vega faster. If there's blood alive out there, she'll know more than our databases ever will. May nodded, fingers already moving. Moran reached to gather the other photos, but left number 7 on the table a moment longer, as if reluctant to break the spell. Harper didn't move until she was sure the image was safe. In the long fight of police work, small pieces sometimes lit the way forward. A shoe print, a note, a cry in the dark. This was different. This was a voice across decades, a mother or daughter or ghost handing them the thread of a secret city family. When she finally turned to leave, coat flung over one arm, Harper said quietly to no one in particular, "She's telling us she's alive." Or she was long enough to pass the map on. The team filed out into the brighter corridor, leaving the photo in its protective sleeve on the table for the lab. The young woman stared back from 1989, brass gleaming at her throat, half smile caught in a world the city forgot, a world now reaching up one baby at a time. Harper sat alone for a long while after the others drifted out, the hum of the evidence room loud in the quiet. She'd pulled one of the brittle photos back from its sleeve, just long enough to read the writing along the lower edge again. The ink had bled into the Polaroid's white border, shaky but deliberate. Gloria, April, 89. The name wasn't unfamiliar. In a city of 8 million, names repeat. But this one belonged to an old file Harper had brushed past years ago while working cold cases. It had lived in a thin, nearly forgotten box of disappearances labeled presumed voluntary runaway/possible domestic abuse. She remembered the photo on the cover sheet, a girl-woman with tired eyes, and the odd half-page noting pregnancy, but no prenatal care. The case had died quietly after a few newspaper blurbs and one half-hearted search. She hadn't been seasoned enough back then to know how many lives simply slipped through cracks. Now the weight fell heavier. She keyed into the digital archive and pulled up the original report. It loaded slow, scanned pages crooked on the screen. Missing person. Gloria Vega. DOB December 10th, 66. Last seen April 4th, 1989. Leaving the Franklin Diner, Sunset Park. 6 months pregnant. Asterisk family had filed but got little traction. Gloria's mother Rosa had insisted her daughter feared the baby's father, a man who worked construction on the subway expansion never named. Detectives back then chalked it up to family drama and a runaway narrative. Harper rubbed her temple. 36 years ago, the city assumed pregnant runaways just disappeared, especially if they were young, Latina, with no lawyer, no clout. No one asked how a girl like that might know a man with keys to the underground. She leaned back, seeing the threads. Gloria pregnant and frightened, perhaps helped by someone who knew the tunnels intimately. A medallion handed over like protection. Hide until birth. Maybe hide longer. Maybe a baby raised below and later above, now grown enough to leave a child of her own on a safe seat. The line wasn't straight, but it glowed faintly through the dark. Harper checked the follow-up notes from '89. One detail leapt. A complaint filed by a former MTA maintenance worker named Rafael Mendez reported stolen keys, a medallion, the same week Gloria vanished. Case never linked. Rafael Mendez, Harper whispered. Who taught you? She paged through faded memos. An interview with Rosa Vega, barely a paragraph. Rosa had said her daughter trusted a man older from the trains who promised to keep her safe. Police at the time dismissed it as rumor. Harper closed her eyes briefly. The medallion on the baby's fist was a promise fulfilled. Safe handoff, not random abandonment. Moran's knock broke her reverie. Detective? We got Rosa's address confirmed. She's alive, 81, lives with a niece in Jackson Heights. Harper looked up sharply. Now! Tonight, if you want. She's listed. No protective services needed. Harper glanced once more at the photo of young Gloria, hair loose, brass gleaming. We go now. Quiet. No press. Moran hesitated. Think she'll talk? She's been waiting 36 years for someone to ask the right way, Harper said, and we have her daughter's face in our hands. She slid the photograph gently back into its protective sleeve, labeled it key evidence, Gloria Vega, and tucked it under her arm with the file. The weight felt both fragile and electric. When she reached the door, Moran said softly, "You okay?" Harper paused. She had worked homicide and missing persons long enough to build walls. But something about Gloria had cut through. Maybe the stubborn care built in secret tunnels. Maybe the baby's quiet acceptance of new arms. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice came out lower than usual. Just angry it took this long. In the hall, the sound of the city returned. Elevators clanking, radios buzzing. But underneath, Harper still heard that first echo. A baby's cry on an empty car. A woman's ghost slipping between cameras. Now she had a name to give the shadow. And a door to knock on that might open a whole buried history. She tightened her coat and moved fast. Moran keeping stride. The photograph clutched like a map. Tonight, maybe, the tunnels would start talking. And maybe Rosa Vega, after decades of silence, would speak a truth no record had caught. Somewhere deep below, in the damn place where Gloria once hid and planned and loved enough to survive, the city's forgotten passages waited. But Harper had the first real link, a human name alive again. The key room was never meant to feel vulnerable. It sat behind 2 layers of steel doors deep inside the MTA center facility at Coney Island Yard, a bunker of racks and drawers built when keys were heavier than passwords, and every lock on the subway belonged to a family of metal teeth. Harper followed Carlin down a narrow stairwell and into the long, windowless hall that smelled of oil and brass. The place looked unchanged since the 1950s. Green painted cabinets, clunky padlocks, faded ledger books lined up on a counter beside an ancient typewriter. 2 security men were already waiting, faces pale and stiff. One of them, Feld, opened a drawer with shaking hands and pulled out a canvas-wrapped bundle of keys the size of her palm. Dozens of old medallions and engraved shafts clinked dully as he spread them on the table under harsh fluorescence. Carlin's jaw worked tight. "This is every bone we've got left," he said, using Luis Ortega's slang without noticing. Or should be. May set her tablet down and started photographing. "Serial numbers?" "Stamped here," Feld said, turning one over to show a shallow engraving. 3-4-17B. Others carried similar tiny marks. Codes for hatches, vents, tool closets. These were grandfathered when we digitized. Only a handful still fit. We keep them locked, inventory twice a year. "Your last check?" Harper asked. "January." Feld swallowed. "We should have caught this." Carlin shot him a warning look, but Harper only said, "Show me." Feld produced a thick, yellowing ledger and flipped to the winter entry. The grid was meticulous. Columns for key numbers, sign-outs, return signatures. Harper scanned with practiced eyes until she reached a blank space in the neat script. One key, number 77B, recorded in a cramped 1940s hand, annotated decades ago. Asterisk master, service and ventilation. Compatible with Auxiliary Access 17B. Asterisk the column for its January check was empty. No digital record? May asked. None, Carlin said grimly. Pre-digitization bones weren't assigned barcodes. We keep a paper trail only. Who had access? Harper's voice stayed mild, but it cut. Carlin looked uncomfortable. 4 full-time supervisors, plus me. A dozen retired with grandfather clearance. Old guard we trust. Custodians come down for deep clean once a month, escorted. Moran, hovering near the doorway, asked the obvious. Any sign of forced entry? No, Felt said quickly. Door logs clean. Cameras. Well, blind spot between stair and vestibule. Harper's gaze sharpened. Convenient. Carlin bristled, but didn't argue. He knew how bad this looked. No modern tracking, no alarms for an object older than most of the staff. Whoever took 77B didn't just stumble on it. They knew where it lived and how to bypass the few electronic layers added over the years. May quietly snapped a shot of the ledger entry. So someone pulled the exact key that opens a corridor where the baby appeared. Yes, Harper said, voice flat. Carlin exhaled hard and rubbed his forehead. This is going to get ugly. It's already ugly, Harper replied. We've got a stolen master, a cold missing persons tie, and a child placed on a live track. Whoever did this knows your ghost better than you do. Feld shifted uncomfortably. You think an inside job? I think someone with history and motive, Harper said. Maybe not current staff, but blood ties count. We've seen how families guard these secrets. She flipped the ledger shut and looked up. I want names. Everyone with this room's code before digital logs. Everyone who trained on bones. Carlin hesitated only a moment before nodding grimly. You'll have them. As the team gathered photos and scanned the racks, Harper let her fingers drift across one heavy medallion still in place. Cold, scratched, worn by hands now gone. Each was a key to places the city preferred to forget, but someone out there had remembered and acted. May caught her eye. You think the stolen key belongs to glorious people? I think it's the same language, Harper said quietly. The medallion, the chalk marks, the shrine. Somebody grew up on stories about these tunnels and decided to use them. Not for harm, Moran said, almost to herself. No, Harper admitted, softer. For passage, protection. But a missing master key in the wrong hands means we're playing catch-up. She turned to Carlin again. Lock this room down. New seals, cameras, electronic log. Tonight, pretend we're plugging leaks, but don't let press near it. Carlin's mouth tightened. Already done. As they climbed the stairs back to daylight, Harper felt the city over their heads. Millions of strangers rushing trains, none of them aware that one missing brass key could open worlds below their feet. She thought of the woman in the Polaroid, the medallion at her neck like inheritance, and of the infant who had traveled unseen through veins no map could track. When they reached the door to the surface hall, Harper paused and looked back once at the dim rows of drawers. It's not theft, she said softly, almost to herself. It's reclamation. Someone claimed what we left unguarded. Then she pushed into the noise and light, coat swinging, already thinking ahead. Rosa Vega, the baby-safe room at ACS. The photos now tied to a stolen key. The case had shifted again. What began with a cry on an empty car was now a reckoning with a whole hidden city and the families who refused to let it vanish. Rain streaked the precinct windows the morning the call came from the hospital's genetics unit. Harper had been staring at a corkboard thick with printouts. Gloria Vega's 1989 file. Photos from the sleeping bag alcove, the chalk arrows mapped against Luis Ortega's memories. The baby's hospital bracelet lay on the desk beside her coffee. She didn't realize how still she'd gone until Moran said her name twice. It's Moran said, phone half covered. Genetics lab. Harper snatched a handset before she could think. Detective Harper. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Patel. Lead on the expedited DNA work. Calm but deliberate. We ran the infant swabs through Cody's and state-level missing persons matches. No immediate parental hits. No mother, no father, nothing current. Harper's shoulders tensed, but she'd half expected that. So no one filed as kid missing. Correct, Patel said. But we did run extended kinship markers against unresolved maternal line samples. You asked for anything with partial similarity to Gloria Vega's case. Harper's pulse flicked, and you got a hit. A pause, the doctor choosing careful words. Partial match, second degree at least. The child's mitochondrial DNA strongly aligns with a sample archive from Gloria Vega's comb in '89, enough to suggest direct descent, daughter or granddaughter. Harper closed her eyes for one slow breath. Not immediate, but blood. So the baby isn't Gloria's child. Too much time. But could be grandchild, she said. Yes, we can't say generational gap exactly, but maternal line is clear. Harper thanked Patel, hung up, and let the room breathe back into focus. Moran was watching. May was half out of her seat, reading her face. Well, Moran asked, Gloria Vega's blood. Harper said quietly, child or grandchild. The line didn't end in '89. May exhaled like she'd been holding her lungs shut. So the woman on camera, 12. Likely Gloria's daughter, Harper said. Raised in those tunnels. Came above ground just enough to put her own baby where we'd find him. Morales stepped closer to the board, tracing photos with his eyes. She didn't abandon him. She delivered him. Harper nodded, safe as she could manage. Chose us over total darkness. For a long moment, no one spoke. The implication felt heavy but alive. They weren't chasing a kidnapper. They were looking at a generational survival story playing out under their feet. Moran finally said, so Rosa Vega's our bridge. She's Gloria's mother. She'll know if a daughter returned. We go to Rosa, Harper agreed, and we go with respect. May tapped at her tablet. DNA doesn't match immediate state or national missing persons, but the mother's never been reported missing. If she's an underground, she wouldn't show up. Exactly, Harper said. She lived outside every system long enough to raise a child. Morales frowned. But why surface now? Why risk leaving the baby? Harper looked at the photograph of the young woman with the medallion at her throat. Because sometimes survival has to become something more. Maybe she wanted her child above ground. Safe. Maybe she's sick. Maybe hunted. We don't know yet. They all stared at the photos arrayed on the board. The long coat, the chalk marks, the sleeping bag shrined with decades of careful care. Moran finally broke the quiet. You're thinking she's alive. I'm thinking she's close, Harper said. Close enough to know where we'd search. Close enough to know we'd treat that baby well. The rain rattled the windows harder. Somewhere a train's vibration trembled faintly through the building. The sound felt like the tunnel speaking. Next step, May said quietly. Harper tapped a photo of Gloria, then the one of photograph number 7. Rosa Vega. Tonight, and we bring the medallion and this new DNA confirmation. We don't scare her, we ask. Moran hesitated. And if Rosa's daughter's listening? Then she'll know we're not hunting, Harper said, voice steady but low. We're trying to understand. She reached her phone again, dialing Child Protective Services to update Marisol Vega. The coincidence of her last name no longer just coincidence, but maybe thread. She told herself to keep clinical, but some quiet hope pressed at her ribs. For once, a cold case was not just paperwork aging into dust. It was breathing, alive, trying to surface. When she hung up, Harper stood at the board a moment longer, looking at the faint Polaroid smile and the gleam of brass on the young woman's chest. The story had started with Cry on track 4, but what it wanted was not pity. It wanted connection, recognition, a bridge back into the world. Let's go knock, Harper said softly. The others gathered coats and folders. Out beyond the glass doors, the rain kept falling over a city busy with its own noise, unaware that far below, love and survival had built a family no system could trace. Now, at last, the lines between those worlds were beginning to meet. It started just after midnight, when most of the control room crew was half running on caffeine and muscle memory. A dispatcher at the rail operations center reached to adjust the volume on his console, frowning at a thin hiss that didn't belong. Static was normal. They lived with it. But this sound seemed to thread itself through the ordinary noise, a hum with shape, like breath caught inside a seashell. He leaned closer, tapped again. For a heartbeat, he thought it was a trick of fatigue, but then came the faintest melody, distant and tremulous. Notes so soft they barely survived a ride through decades-old wiring, but undeniably a tune, rocking, swaying, for measures repeated. He thought of a cradle song his grandmother used to hum. Ops to all trains on 4-line. He said automatically, but his voice faltered. The hiss swallowed him for a second, and underneath, he swore he heard words. Spanish. Fragmented, but clear enough to catch Dormit Niño. Dormit ya. He snatched his headset off, eyes wide, and waved the night techs hunched over monitors. You hear that? They patched in a loop. The melody flickered once more, then faded to a plain carrier hiss. Dead air except for the usual clicks and squeals of metal wheels far away. Playback, one tech said, already rewinding the digital buffer. But the moment was gone. The recording caught only static, the ordinary kind, no trace of the lullaby. By morning, the story had trickled upward like water in cracks. Someone had clipped a rough audio file, barely a second of odd hum, no song left, and passed it along as curiosity. By breakfast, a few of the older field officers were muttering about ghost line chatter, the way the tunnels sometimes spoke when you've been down long enough. Harper heard about it when she came in to prep for the Vega visit. A young patrol officer from night shift stopped her by the coffee urn, half embarrassed. Detective, you know the Track 4 baby case? Radio started singing down there. Harper raised an eyebrow. Singing? Couple seconds. Spanish lullaby. Ops tried to log it, but couldn't duplicate. She might have brushed it off if not for the way the kid's voice tightened. Fear edged with awe. Harper had been in the field long enough to know rumor carried its own power. Still, she asked for the file and had May run spectrum analysis. They crowded around a laptop mid-morning, while May clicked through audio filters. A thin hiss filled the room. Then, for a breath, a rise and fall that might have been mechanical echo, or might have been a woman's voice if you were listening with your heart. May tried to isolate frequencies, nothing conclusive, just rail noise colliding with stray EM bursts. Could be interference from an old repeater, Morales offered. Could be a pocket recording bleeding into band, Moran added. May shook her head. Could be anything, but it's not repeatable. That's the strange part. Same gear, same channel. Dead sense. Harper listened again, silent. She caught something under the hum, not full words, but the shape of them. Dormit. She thought of Gloria, of the sleeping bag shrine, of photos taped with quiet, stubborn love, a mother rocking a baby somewhere dark and humming while trains roared past. It was easier to imagine than to dismiss. She finally shut the laptop. We're not chasing ghosts, she said, though her voice had softened. But make a note. Time, frequency, location. Moran smirked faintly. To add to the haunted subway file? To remember, Harper said. Sometimes things break through for a reason. Downstairs, gossip spread fast. Track workers whispered that the tunnels didn't like being opened, that when you pulled up their secrets, they answered back. One older sergeant muttered that his grandmother's lullaby had sounded the same. Another officer swore she felt a cold draft pass her on a sealed stairwell at the exact time the radio sang. Harper ignored the myth-making, but she didn't crush it either. She'd learned not to sneer at what kept people sharp and listening. The city's underworld had its own language. Before heading to Queens for the meeting with Rosa Vega, she played the audio one more time alone. This time she didn't analyze. She just listened. Faint as smoke, the notes seemed to drift up from far below, almost kind. She pictured the hooded woman on camera 12-stepping into some forgotten alcove, baby tucked tight, humming as she walked. Leaving him for strangers wasn't cold. It was courage braided with grief. She closed the file and slipped her phone into her pocket. Out in the hallway, the precinct felt ordinary again, fluorescent, busy, alive with other cases. But under the floor she imagined the rails still humming, carrying lullabies through copper veins, a mother's voice threaded into static because it had nowhere else to go. When she met Moran by the door, ready to drive to Rosa Vega's apartment, Moran asked, Something? Just a message, Harper said. One we might never prove. They stepped out into the damp morning. Somewhere far below, the city whispered in wires and stone, and Harper carried that whisper with her. Proof or not, it was a reminder that love can leave marks deeper than any record, and sometimes even the machines pause to let it through. It was close to dawn when the evidence team finished sealing the alcove. They worked under low lantern light, voices hushed, gloved hands passing relics into crates. The brittle Polaroids, the small toy train, the sleeping bag stiff with time. Harper stood back and let them move with care. She didn't want to crowd the space where a life had once been fought for in secret. Each item was tagged and logged, though she hated how clinical it felt against what they'd found. The small, stubborn tenderness laid out on cold tile. 2 floors above, transit security watched the process through grainy live feeds patched from whatever cameras still functioned down here. Most angles were poor, but enough to track their own people. No one expected to see anything beyond the crew and the detectives. So when a junior tech named Valles yawned and shifted monitors, then froze mid-blink, no one noticed at first. Harper? He said finally, voice going thin through the comm. Harper tapped her earpiece. Go. Channel 42. South Service Platform Cam. It's live. Harper turned to May, who was balancing a tablet of floor plans. May frowned and keyed into the feed. Static cleared to reveal the corridor just outside the sealed alcove, where tracked dust hung in pale beams of lantern light. Empty at first, and then not. A figure stood at the edge of the light, beyond the barricade tape. Long coat to mid-calf. Hood up. Still as a photograph. Jesus. Morales muttered behind Harper's shoulder. The woman didn't move forward. She stayed half hidden by a pillar, just far enough to blur. There was no way to read her face. Yet the posture was unmistakable, quiet and deliberate, like the night on camera 12. Harper felt her pulse notch higher, but kept her voice calm. Is this live? Valles whispered, timestamp rolling. Yes. May adjusted filters, trying for clarity, but the image refused detail. Low light and distance turned the figure to shadow. Still, the coat's hem, the tilt of the head, it was her. Any units close? Harper asked into the comm. Only your team, Valles said. No easy intercept without blowing the whole operation. Harper watched the screen. The woman hadn't flinched or stepped back, though she had to know there were cameras somewhere. She simply stood, a still witness as crates of her life's artifacts were lifted and labeled. Let her be, Harper said at last. Moran turned to her, startled. We're not going after her? Look at her. Harper's tone was even but carried weight. She came back to watch. She wanted to see the handoff, maybe make sure we're treating it right. If we charge, she vanishes and we lose any hope of trust. They stood there and watched together. A minute passed, then another. The figure shifted once, barely, a small tilt, as if acknowledging or maybe just adjusting balance. Then she stepped backward into darkness. The coat swallowed light. In 2 heartbeats the feed was empty. Gone, Valles confirmed quietly. Harper let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She felt something more complicated than frustration. Respect, sadness, a strange sense of dialogue that didn't use words. Clip the footage, she said. Timestamp and secure. Don't leak. May's voice was hushed. She trusted us enough to come back. Or needed to know we weren't destroying her world, Harper said. Either way, she's watching. They went on with the work, but everything felt changed. The crews handled the crates more gently. Even the transit brass who had been irritated earlier seemed to lower their voices. The discovery no longer belonged only to the department. It belonged to some living shadow who still claimed the tunnels as home. When the last container was strapped for transport, Harper stood at the threshold of the alcove and looked into the dark where the woman had stood. She tried to imagine what it took to survive unseen. Carrying a child to forgotten passages, growing up invisible but alive, daring finally to step toward the surface. She tried to picture the courage it took to stand here now, to face the unknown with only distance for armor. Moran came to her side. You think she'll try to reach out? She already has, Harper said softly. Every move she's made is a message. May glanced from her tablet. Then what's this one say? Harper kept her eyes on the dark. That we're not the enemy. That she's still free. They climbed out together, boots echoing in the hollow stairwell. The crates went with the evidence truck. Harper's car would follow them back to the precinct. But as they emerged into dawn light bleeding down the stairwell grates, Harper carried something else. The certainty that this was no ordinary case with a tidy end. Somewhere under the city, the woman with the medallion knew exactly what they had found and what they hadn't. She had let them close enough to see, but not to catch. Harper respected the line. They would pursue the truth, but not as hunters. When the truck doors slammed shut and the city's ordinary noise flooded back, Harper glanced once more at the tunnel mouth. It looked empty, but she felt eyes there, a mother, a daughter, maybe both, still writing their own survival story in tile and shadow. She whispered almost under breath, not for the others. "We saw you." And then she turned toward the waiting day, carrying the silent exchange like a promise. The desk sergeant had just finished signing in an overnight arrest when the glass door hissed open and a small figure shuffled into the lobby. At first, no one noticed. The woman moved slowly, bundled in a gray wool coat a size too large, a flowered scarf tied over silver hair. She paused just inside, catching her breath, then straightened with quiet determination and stepped up to the reception counter. Her face was brown and lined deep, but her dark eyes were alive, sharp with something more than fatigue. "I need Detective Harper," she said in accented but clear English. "About the baby." The sergeant blinked, sat forward. "Ma'am, what baby?" Her hand trembled only slightly as she slid an envelope across the counter. Inside, a photocopy of the brass medallion sat on top of a stack of news clippings printed from online stories about the found infant. "This baby, the one from the subway. I am Rosa Vega. His blood is mine." That name moved like a shock wave through the front desk. The sergeant didn't question further, just hit the line for Harper's unit. "Detective, you've got a visitor." Harper arrived from the elevator minutes later. Coat still half on, eyes narrowing the instant she saw the elderly woman waiting. She didn't need an introduction. The name, the face, older but unmistakably kin to girl in the 1989 photo. Harper slowed, careful not to spook her. "Mrs. Vega?" The old woman turned, relief flickering behind her guarded gaze. "Detective Lena Harper?" "Yes." Harper approached slowly. "You've come about the medallion." "I came about my daughter," Rosa said, voice tight but steady. "And my grandson, or great-grandson. I do not know anymore what time is stolen." Harper gestured gently toward the inner doors. "Let's go somewhere private." In an interview room softened with warm light and no recording equipment running yet, Rosa eased into a chair. She refused help, though Harper hovered a hand near her elbow out of instinct. The scarf slipped back, revealing silver hair plaited thick and strong. "They called me last night," Rosa said once the door shut. "People from your city hall. They want to know if I could confirm a DNA match. I told them nothing until I saw someone who would listen." Her gaze locked on Harper. "Are you listening?" "I am," Harper said quietly. Rosa opened her purse and took out something wrapped in a square cloth. Another medallion, twin to the one the baby had clutched. Time had worn it smooth. She held it like prayer. "Gloria took this when she left me. She was 6 months with child. I begged her to stay. She said the father knew the tunnels and could keep her safe, that the city above was not safe for us." Her voice wavered but never broke. "I never saw her again." Harper stayed still, letting the story unfold. "She promised one day a child would return to me. I thought it was only to comfort an old woman. But then I saw your news. The baby's hand. The medallion." Rosa looked down, trembling now. "That is Gloria's promise." Harper swallowed the surge of empathy and stayed careful. "The baby is safe," she said. "He's in protective care until we know who can claim him. No harm has come to him." Tears filled Rosa's lined eyes but didn't fall. "You must let me see him." "We're working to connect family responsibly," Harper said gently. "We didn't know anyone would come forward. There were no records." Rosa's mouth tightened. "Of course there were no records. We had no power. My daughter was frightened. Men hurt her. City ignored her. So she went below. They think it's ghosts down there. It is just mothers who had no doors left. She laid the medallion on the table. This was her father's before hers. Men who built the tunnels gave it to workers' sons. She kept it for safety. I kept mine for hope. May entered quietly with paperwork and DNA confirmations. Harper waved her off for now. She didn't want a bureaucratic wall between them. Mrs. Vega, Harper said softly, your grandson or great-grandson, we don't yet know his immediate parent. The woman who left him on the train is alive. We believe she's Gloria's child. Something flickered across Rosa's face. Pain, recognition, fierce pride. My granddaughter. Yes. Harper hesitated. Do you know her? Rosa shook her head slowly. Gloria was with child when she disappeared. I prayed, but no news came. If that baby lived and grew, she would be 35 now. She could be the one you almost saw. She came back, Harper said. We think she placed her baby so he'd be safe. She may be near. Rosa's thin hands clenched on the table. Then find her. Tell her she is not alone anymore. Harper leaned in, voice low. Will you help us? Names. Anyone Gloria trusted. Men from the tunnels, friends, safe places. I will give you all I know, Rosa whispered. But promise me the baby will not vanish into system. Harper's answer was simple and firm. He won't. Not if we can help it. For the first time, Rosa smiled, small and trembling but real. Then we have work. In the corridor beyond, officers paused to glance through the glass at the two women bent over a table, the detective and the grandmother of a secret family. The room felt thick with decades unspoken, grief folding into fragile hope. Harper understood then that this case was no longer just evidence and procedure. It was a bridge, and the woman across from her had walked far to reach it. The old woman's voice turned softer, but there was a weight behind it, a sound of stones shifting under earth. Rosa Vega sat with her scarf now undone, her hair silver and long against her back, eyes not on Harper, but somewhere years behind her. She pressed her palms flat to the table, as if bracing against memory. You want to understand my Gloria, she said quietly. Then you must understand the fights we came from. Harper didn't speak, just nodded once. Moran hovered at the door but stayed still. May's pen was poised but silent. Rosa began to weave a history no one in the room had asked for, but everyone felt they owed her space to tell. We lived on the south end of Brooklyn then, near the yards. My father was track crew, my brothers too. The tunnels fed our families. But in the 70s and 80s, the city was cruel to the men who built it. Safety ignored, wages cut. Whole crews laid off and blacklisted after strikes. They said essential, but they treated us like ghosts. Her hands lifted slightly, then dropped. When the big strike came in 80, I was a girl with babies on my hip. My father came home bloodied once from police in the yards. They shut whole lines to break us. Families were trapped underground. No pay, no protection. We survived because the men built hiding places, service alcoves, old repair niches. Secret safe rooms for the ones who still had keys. Harper thought of the sleeping bag shrine and felt a chill. It was older than Gloria. They called them rooms of quiet, Rosa went on. Stocked with water, tins, blankets. So men on night crews could rest unseen when danger came. When work dried, some families used them differently. To hide, to sleep when rent failed, to escape men who hit or hunted them. Gloria grew up hearing about those rooms. She was my wild one, stubborn but gentle too. She knew the map better than I did. Rosa's mouth trembled, but she steadied it. Then she got pregnant. Father the child, older man from track maintenance. Promised marriage, but when trouble came, he vanished. Worse, some men came looking, said he owed them, said she should pay. She was frightened. I told her we could fight together. She said the city didn't protect girls like her. One night she left, only her coat and that medallion her grandfather gave. She said, if I cannot raise this child safe, I will raise it long enough to give it a way out. Those were her last words to me. Harper swallowed, her throat tight but voice calm. She knew where to go. Rosa nodded. She said the tunnels remember their own. She would vanish before letting the streets take her baby. I thought she meant to die. But now, she looked up sharply, eyes wet but fierce. Now I know she meant to survive. And teach survival. May's pen moved, but her face was pale. She must have found others. Oh, yes, Rosa said. Families from the strikes. Old men who still had bones. They shared food, maps. They built a world no one cared to see. They kept children alive. But it is a hard world. When my Gloria did not return, I thought maybe it killed her. Yet she must have grown that child, taught her everything. Harper pictured the hooded woman stepping from dark to light, her calm, deliberate hand placing a baby where trains would pass and police would come fast. Not running, choosing. She told you she'd return? Harper asked gently. She said, "If I cannot stay, I will send someone back to you." Rosa's voice cracked on the memory. It took 36 years, but she kept her word. For a while, no one moved. The hum of the precinct outside was faint. The table between them seemed to belong to another time. Rosa wiped her cheek with the back of one hand. Your police look for bad men down there. But many are just broken families making do. Remember that when you search. Harper nodded, heavy with the truth of it. We'll remember. She may not show her face, Rosa warned. My granddaughter has lived her whole life invisible. But she trusted you enough to send the child. Do not break that trust. Harper reached across and touched the edge of the medallion Rosa had brought. We'll try to bring her in safe. We want her story told, not lost. Something eased in Rosa's shoulders. Then maybe my Gloria can rest. Moran finally spoke in the doorway, voice quiet. And maybe this baby grows above ground. Yes, Rosa said, gaze distant but warm. That's what all this was for. Outside, a train rumbled past somewhere deep under concrete, the vibration soft but steady. Harper felt it in her feet, a living artery still moving. She imagined the hidden rooms, the families who refused to let history bury them, the mothers who turned abandoned steel into refuge. She looked at Rosa and said quietly, "We'll keep following the map." "And I will help," Rosa answered, straightening despite her years. "I am tired of ghosts." For the first time since the baby's cry, Harper sensed not just loss but a current of return, old fights surfacing, ready to be seen and maybe healed. The case file on Harper's desk had grown thick enough to bow under its own weight. Photos, blueprints, evidence tags, all the neat architecture of investigation. But nothing about it felt neat anymore. The law said one thing: an infant alone on a public train is abandonment. Full stop. The child had been left in a place alive with hazards. Third rails, strangers cold. Procedure said report, petition for custody, build a case for neglect if the parents surfaced. Yet everything Harper had learned in the tunnels argued with that clean line. She sat with the quiet war inside her, boots still streaked with tunnel dust. The baby's hospital band rested on top of the stack, beside the medallion in its plastic sleeve. She looked at it until her chest hurt. That bit of brass was not trash. It was a cipher of survival, handed down through workers who refused to be erased, through Gloria who disappeared not out of carelessness but calculation. The sleeping bag shrine had been no crime scene. It had been a nursery built with whatever scraps safety would allow. She thought about Rose across the table, telling the story of strikes and secret rooms, of a city that had failed its builders and their daughters. Rosa hadn't flinched from truth, but had asked only one thing. Do not let the system swallow this child. He is not garbage. Rosa had said quietly, he is the promise kept. Those words sat heavier than the statutes Harper had memorized back at the academy. Moran came in with fresh coffee and found her still staring at the pile. You look like someone trying to rewrite policy alone, Moran said gently. Feels like it, Harper answered without looking up. Moran sat opposite, letting silence stretch. Finally, you're weighing abandonment versus something else. Protection, Harper said, almost whispering. She didn't dump him. She walked a route older than we are, found the one camera that wouldn't see her face, and left him alive where we'd come fast. She gave him to us without giving herself up. That's not thrown away. But the law, I know the law. Harper's voice sharpened, then softened again. But the law wasn't built for families who had to vanish to survive. It doesn't know tunnels or strikes or the way we look past them until now. Moran nodded slowly. So, what do we do? Harper rubbed her forehead. We keep him safe, but we don't brand as bloodline criminal. If she surfaces, we talk before we charge. If she doesn't, we give Rosa every chance to claim kinship. And we document not just crime scene notes, but history. The safe rooms, the stolen key, the reason someone would choose shadow over surface. That's not how reports usually read. Moran said with a faint, wry smile. Maybe it's time they do. Harper exhaled. You know what happens if we stamp this abandonment. Baby goes into foster care with no context. Mother's a phantom. Grandmother's just an afterthought. The story dies. And all we teach is that surviving outside our system makes you a villain. Moran's expression shifted from doubt to something closer to respect. You're the detective. You can frame the narrative. I can try, Harper said. I can give the DA everything, but also show that this was a handoff, not a discard. She touched the medallion's bag with one finger. This means something. They sat together for a long moment while the rain eased against the windows and the city above moved on, unaware. You think she'll come back? Moran asked finally. I think she already did, Harper said, and maybe she's waiting to see if we're worthy of what she risked. Moran let out a breath. Then let's not fail her. Harper gathered the files slowly, organizing but not closing it. She left the photos of Gloria and photograph number 7 on top, a quiet counterweight to the word abandonment. She would write her report with care, flagging the unknown mother as potential protective placement, not malicious desertion. She would ask the family court to consider heritage before severing ties, and she would push to keep the investigation alive, but with the humility of someone entering another people's hidden city. Before she shut off the desk lamp, Harper slipped the medallion out once more. Through the plastic, she could feel its worn warmth, as if all the hands before it left more than fingerprints. Not garbage, she whispered, echoing Rosa. She replaced it and stood. Tomorrow would bring legal counsel, ACS representatives, press sniffing at the edges. But tonight, just for a breath, she let herself hold a contradiction. A baby alone, yes, but also delivered with intention. A mother absent, but present in every mark she left. Harper walked out of the office with the file under her arm, the decision not final but forming. She would uphold the law, but she would also honor the map of care carved through stone by people the city forgot. Some cases demanded more than evidence. They demanded understanding. And this one, the baby, the tunnels, the medallion, deserved at least that much. Harper pinned the last photograph to the timeline and stepped back as if she were looking at a stage set she'd been asked to light. The board held hours shaved into minutes, minutes shaved into seconds, and under each, a path. Chalk arrows copied from tile, Luis Ortega's excess for forgotten hatches, the thin scratch of a pencil around 17B. She spoke less to the room than to the map itself, letting the sequence harden into something that could bear weight. It begins before midnight, she decided. A woman in a long coat wakes a baby in the sleeping bag shrine and feeds him by the glow of a lantern hooded with an old coffee tin. She checks the brass medallion, the way some people check a saint's medal, rubs a thumb once along its worn rim, then ties it to a short length of cord and loops it through the baby's fist so it will not slip away. She packs nothing that clatters. Formula and water stay behind. There'll be dead weight if she stopped. The toy train, the photos, those live here. This is a place, not luggage. She marks the last bend with chalk. 4 dots, the curve of an arrow. The signs aren't for her. They're for anyone who might one day follow, and for herself if fear steals memory. Then she waits, not for courage, but for the system's breath. Those predictable stutters every old hand knows. In the small hours, the signals hiccup near the curve. Yellow nibbling red, a rail circuit that misbehaves when damp creeps in. Maybe she could trigger it with a touch at an obsolete relay. Maybe she just knows the window by heart. Either way, at 4:50 the line begins to blink. Key 77B is not a rumor. It lives, cool and old, in her pocket, With it, she opens auxiliary maintenance access 17B. Paint sawduct giving with a soft sigh. She slips into the back vein, not the public platform, and the tunnel accepts her as if she belongs. Because she does. The air is colder here. She breathes through her scarf so the baby won't taste her nerves. A low carrier, no stroller, nothing modern, rolls quietly on rubber casters. In it, a folded blanket and a warm bottle in case the world does not go to plan. At 4:51, the engineer sees something between cars 4 and 5. Coat, hood, balance of someone born to steal. She has stepped onto the coupler for 2 heartbeats, not to ride, but to count rhythm, to feel the trains crawl as the signal falters. Enough information to finish timing in her bones. She is already at the ventilation hatch by the time the operator takes the curve. Through its grate, she can see the last car's heater bench, the one under the brightest bulb when a train holds under fault. The cameras on that side are ancient. One blinks once per second. The other stares past the place she needs like a tired eye. At 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 9 seconds, camera 12 catches only a suggestion. A code hem. The outline of a gloved hand nudging something low along the wall. No face. She is in the blind stare, the place that was never meant for passengers. The service door swings an inch. Its locked tongue rests on old paint, quiet as breath. She slides the carrier forward with her knee, then lifts the baby. 2 practice moves, one hand on the head, one bracing the small body, onto the cracked vinyl seat where the heater hum makes a cradle of air. The blanket goes up around his chest. She tucks the medallion into his fist, closes his fingers gently until the small knuckles pale. If the metal could speak, it would say all the names the city forgot. It is 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 11 seconds. She leans in, mouth near the baby's ear, and gives him the only thing they will never bag as evidence, a whispered promise in the first line of a lullaby. She does not kiss his forehead. She is already erasing sight lines. At 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 12 seconds, the low-frame camera blinks, and when it opens its eye again, the car contains a child and no one else. From the hatch, she watches 30 more seconds, then 40. She waits for the noise that means the machine has noticed life. The messenger stammer on the emergency intercom, the snap of doors sealing, the first radio call that turns a quiet car into an event. The train has become a lighthouse. She recedes into dark, not running but folding back along a line that has been taught through hands, not maps. Chalk marks curl her home. Behind her, a draft sighs. In front of her, the medallion's ghost weight leaves her palm and argues against panic. By 4:54, officers enter the car with their careful voices and their open hands. She is in the side corridor by then, counting bolts by fingertip, avoiding the one camera that would catch her as a blur. EMS arrives. She hears the zipper rasp of a kit opening. She does not take the hatch that pops onto the public platform. She chooses the older path, the one that smells of machine oil and linseed, past a lockered door carved GV. She is not sentimental now. The shrine is a place for beginnings, not for endings. She pauses once, only once, to add a fresh chalk arrow where condensation will erase it by tomorrow. At 5:02, the child's cry fades into the soft shushing of strangers who mean well. She knows the sound. She has trained him for it. The medallion never leaves his fist. She trusts that part to hold. By 5:10, she has closed 17B behind her and palmed the paint back over the seam the way she was taught. The key returns to her pocket. Its twin, the one with the scratch cereal, now rides with the child. Between them, the history divides and doubles. 2 halves the same route. Later, while day builds itself above ground and pressed vehicles crowd the curb, she will climb to a disused platform in shadow and watch, still as a beam, as crates carry her life out of the alcove. She will not stop them. The city must hold some of it now if the boy is to be held by the city. But in that hour between signal flicker and first siren, the path is hers alone. Through obsolete doors, along rails that sing, into the safest lit car in a paused world, where she does the bravest thing she has ever done and leaves her child to be found. The small operations room felt like the inside of a clock, silent except for the click and sigh of machines as Machen worked. She had spread the medallion's macro photographs across 3 monitors, each scratch and pit magnified until the brass looked like the surface of an alien planet. On another screen, she ran pattern recognition, letting old cartography overlays from Luis Ortega's map flicker against the etchings. The rest of the team waited without breaking her focus. Harper standing with arms folded, Moran leaning on the filing cabinet, Morales slouched but alert. At first the marks had seemed random, just wear and a few gouges. But May's patience turned randomness to rhythm. She enlarged one quadrant and rotated it until the lines no longer looked like scratches but like tiny rails, a loop with 2 exits. Another set of dots fell exactly where Luis had drawn forgotten service hatches. "This isn't decoration," May said finally, quiet but certain. "It's cartography." Harper stepped closer. "Show me." May split the screen. On one side, medallion, on the other, the 1941 blueprint. She layered transparencies until the etchings aligned with the network like teeth into a lock. 4 dots matched 4 verified hatches that Luis had marked from memory. 17B, 22A, an old ventilation shaft under Bay Ridge, and one uncharted spur near Court Street. The curling arrow wasn't just flourish. It mirrored the loop you'd walk to bypass cameras and reach the service car where the baby was left. Morales whistled low. She built a key you could read with no paper. "And there's more," May said, zooming in on a faint spiral etched near the edge. Inside it, almost invisible, tiny letters, initials? She enhanced carefully, RM/LC/JQ. Luis Ortega, when consulted, had guessed those might be names of retired track hands. The medallion wasn't just a map. It was a trust list, people who would not betray you if you surfaced in need. LC is Luis himself, May said. RM could be Rafael Mendez. The stolen key report from '89. JQ still looking. Harper's stomach tightened. So the woman marked allies. Old men she could count on if she got stuck with the baby. She turned a family heirloom into a living guide, May said. Map, code, and friend list all in one. Moran shook her head slowly. Every bit of this screams protection, not flight. Harper nodded but didn't speak right away. She thought of the quiet tunnels, the chalk arrows, and now this, a plan compact enough to fit in a baby's hand. Someone had distilled 30 years of survival into a palm-sized safeguard. "Give me everything on those initials," Harper said finally. "Cross-check with the union rolls Luis gave us. We need to know who's still alive." "On it," May said, as the searches ran. Harper let her eyes rest on the medallion itself, sealed but suddenly alive with meaning. This was no relic passed for luck. It was a road, a list of safe doors, and a whisper. "You are not alone." She imagined the mother standing in her hidden room, etching carefully by lantern light, giving her child a key to the world above, a way home if he had to find alone. Moran broke the silence, voice low. "If we frame this as abandonment after what we've seen, we're blind." Harper's reply was just as quiet. "We won't." Outside the glass, ordinary precinct noise went on. Ringing phones, doors slamming, but inside, the team stayed a little awed. For all their databases and cameras, the deepest intelligence tonight had come from a mother's hand and a tool older than them all. Document the decoding. Harper told May, softer now, but don't let it leak. This isn't a treasure map for scavengers. It's family. May nodded, understood. Harper reached out and touched the edge of the evidence bag with one finger, through plastic and brass. She felt the quiet defiance of whoever had stood alone, and yet not alone in those tunnels. The medallion no longer looked like proof of crime. It looked like the blueprint of love under siege, the architecture of survival carved into metal. Somewhere, perhaps even now, the hooded woman knew they were reading her message. Harper hoped she also knew they were listening. The room was dark except for the glow of monitors. May had spent the night stitching broken surveillance together, a dozen feeds half dead or too old to sync smoothly. She layered them like a quilt. A grainy ceiling cam from a closed stairwell, a thermal hit from a maintenance shaft, a single security lens that still pulsed at 1 frame per second. None alone showed the truth, but together they began to breathe. Harper stood behind her, coffee untouched, watching pixels line up into a night that had refused to be caught. At first the composite was only shadow and echo. A corridor seemed where condensation smeared the lens, a hint of motion, maybe a rat or a draft. Then the algorithm May had written settled and the ghost sharpened. A long coat sliding past the service door, hood drawn low, the curved outline of a baby, carrier pressed close to her chest. She paused just inside the stairwell, one hand flat to the wall, as if listening for the city's pulse. Timestamp. Harper asked quietly. 4 hours, 51 minutes, and 32 seconds. May said. Signal fault window. They watched her move with calm, deliberate grace. No panic, no wasted motion. She was counting. Harper realized. The way her head tipped, the tiny lift of her wrist toward the rails. She was listening to the brakes, an electric hum, waiting for the train to stall. When the indicator light down the tunnel blinked from yellow to red, she went. The next angle came from the oldest of the cameras, a fisheye at the end of car 7. It caught her only for an instant as she stepped through the maintenance hatch into the car's vestibule. Even blown large on the screen, she was a blur. Coat hem, gloved hands, the small shape of a sleeping child strapped against her front. She eased the carrier to the floor, one knee down so the move was silent. The baby stirred but didn't cry. She reached into the coat pocket and took out the medallion, gleaming briefly in the dim emergency light. Her fingers curled the baby's fist and tucked the brass deep into the palm until the tiny hand closed reflexively. She paused there, not moving, maybe waiting for the grip to hold. Look, May whispered. The mother bent then, head so close the hood nearly brushed the child's cheek. No audio survived. The angle was too poor and the mic too dead. But the shape of her mouth was clear. Slow syllables. Something soft. Maybe the lullaby that haunted the transit radios hours later. 2 words repeated. A third drawn longer. A name. A promise. Harper leaned closer, almost holding her breath. After that, she glanced up once, just once, toward the ceiling as if aware of the machine eye above her. Then she slid the carrier straps under the seat so it would not tip, pulled the blanket high around the baby's chin, and stood. The motion was practiced but full of care. Nothing abandoned about it. She didn't run. She took 3 backward steps into the service hatch, eyes still on the child, then turned and was gone. The last frame caught only the sway of her coat vanishing into black. 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 14 seconds, May said. Harper rubbed at her jaw, silent. The footage was a rebuke to every form labeled abandonment. This was something else. A hand off to the world above, as gentle as she could make it. They rolled the video again and again, each time the same quiet choreography. Safety checked. Danger calculated. Love compressed into a gesture. Morales came in halfway through and stopped cold at the image of the medallion being pressed into the infant's hand. She wanted us to see that, Morales said, to know it meant something, or to tell him he belonged somewhere, Harper murmured. Rosa sat with him later, when Harper was ready. The old woman leaned so close her breath fogged the screen. She didn't weep. She watched like someone decoding a language she once knew. When the whispered words played silently, Rosa put her fingers to her lips. She said, "Mi cielo." Rosa whispered, "My sky." That was Gloria's phrase for her baby. Harper felt her throat tighten, but she stayed still. The case was not suddenly simple. The law still asked for boxes ticked for safety, for proof. But the night now had a face, a touch, a lullaby. The child had not been discarded. He had been delivered. They saved the composite to a secure drive. No leaks, no press. Harper signed the chain of custody with hands that shook slightly from something that wasn't just coffee. She knew they were holding not only evidence, but a mother's final gift, a record of trust, risk, and a decision few would understand. When everyone else drifted back to their posts, Harper stayed alone with the paused frame, the woman's bowed head over the child's hand. In that still second, the city's brutal machinery and all its forgotten labyrinths seemed to fall away, leaving only the oldest act in the world, letting go so someone might live. She shut down the monitor and whispered once, almost to the empty room, "We saw you." Then she closed the file and turned toward the work ahead, resolved that whatever report she filed would carry the truth that now could not be unseen. By morning, the station house was ringed with vans and telescoping antennas. Reporters leaned against barricades with damp coats and paper cups of coffee, calling questions the way gulls cry when a fishing boat comes in. Lenses hunted any movement behind the glass doors. Satellite trucks idled. Screens filled with grainy stills scraped from security leaks. The shadowed woman at the edge of the platform. The baby under harsh fluorescent light. A single gleaming medallion. Headlines screamed across the city. Ghost mother rides the tunnels. Subway baby miracle. Who left him and why? Inside the precinct, the noise felt like weather beating against a sealed house. Phones rang, but Harper's unit worked in a hush. She'd ordered the team to pull blinds and reroute calls through the press office. May's monitor still glowed with maps and data, but the sound was off. Only the faint hum of electronics kept time. Morales perched on the radiator, reading a report and ripping it into strips when he reached a dead lead. Moran typed slowly, adding careful notes to the file. So if a DA tried to flatten the story into abandonment, there would be a counterweight of facts and context. Harper herself stood at the narrow window that looked onto the street. She could see microphones thrust forward whenever anyone approached the doors. A flash went off as an intern from legal carried in takeout. Poor kid blinking into the barrage. Harper turned away. There was no point in watching spectacle. They had decided early how much to say. The public had the broad bones. Infant found safe, case under protective review, family ties being sought. But they did not release the medallion's map or the names etched small and hidden. They did not show the composite video that had cost May a night of soldered feeds. The lullaby, Rose's cracked whisper translated Misilo, the network of secret rooms. Those would not be reduced to children or turned into adventure bait for urban explorers. Some things belonged to the dark, where they were born. The choice wasn't easy. Press officers argue for transparency. Control the narrative before rumor does, one captain had said, but Harper knew the cost. Publish the map, and every forgotten hatch would become a playground. Name the allies, and you endanger the fragile old men who had survived by disappearing. Show the handoff footage, and the mother loses the last shred of safety she carved for herself. So the official line stayed clean and spare. Police seeking family. Infant healthy. Investigation continuing. No charges announced. Reporters shouted back that the department was hiding something, protecting an underground cult, covering a kidnapping. Harper let them shout. Better noise than exploitation. Rosa had been smuggled in through a side door that morning. She sat now in the small conference room with a blanket over her knees, waiting for another DNA consult and a supervised visit with the baby. She had glanced at the window once, saw the crowd, and then looked down without comment. She understood keeping some things unspoken. Her life had been built on silences that kept children alive. Moran drifted to Harper's side. Press is asking if we'll show the video. We won't, Harper said flat. They're pushing freedom of information. They'll get redacted feeds. She exhaled. What matters isn't their headline. It's whether that woman knows we didn't betray her trust. You think she's watching? Every second. Harper's eyes flicked to the dark street corners where no cameras aimed, but someone could stand and see. She'll know if we sell her story. Outside, a chant started. Reporters hungry for any scrap. Ghost mother, ghost mother. Inside, the air held the quiet concentration of people protecting more than a case file. May sent encrypted messages to IT to lock down access. Morales spoke softly with Rosa about the medallion's names. They would reach out privately, no subpoenas, no leaks. By mid-afternoon, the first tabloids hit social feeds. Wild speculation, composites of hooded figures that looked nothing like the real woman, diagrams of tunnels stolen from old transit blogs. Harper didn't look. She had seen how easily Miss Swallow's fact. This wasn't a myth she was willing to feed. Instead, she walked the nursery room where the baby lay asleep in protective care, a small fist still curved as if the medallion were there. Rosa stood a few feet away, hands shaking, but she didn't cry. Harper gave her space, only standing guard in the doorway. The city outside could shout and guess. In here, the story belonged to the child and the bloodline that had fought to bring him to light. When Harper returned to her desk near dusk, the crowd beyond the barricades was louder. The lights of evening made their cameras flare like tiny suns. She shut the blinds and felt relief in the sudden dim. It was a small act of keeping, holding back what needed to stay whole, even against the hunger of a city that devoured secrets. She sat and opened a report, typing slowly, deliberately. words to satisfy the law, but also to protect a promise. The case was not closed, and maybe never would be, but at least for now, the shadows could keep some of their own history, unbroken. And somewhere under the street noise, Harper hoped the woman with the long coat heard that decision and stayed safe enough to watch another day. The train came light and hollow through the tunnel, a late-night local with more empty seats than passengers. Harper stepped aboard alone, her badge tucked out of sight, coat collar up against the thin winter draft that rides steel. She had chosen this run deliberately. The same line where the baby had been found, the hour close to that one when signal lights stutter and even the rats go still. She sat near the back, knees loose, the medallion's cool weight inside her pocket a small, private anchor. She hadn't meant to keep it overnight, but after the day's press storm and the long meeting with child services, she couldn't put it back in the property drawer. It was still evidence, yes, but it was also something else, a key, a story, maybe a prayer. She'd promised herself to return it in the morning. Tonight, though, she needed to understand what it meant to carry the thing through the city it mapped. The car swayed, lights flickering once where the power dipped. She could smell damp concrete, iron, the faint sting of old grease. Out the window, there were moments of black pierced by quick glints, forgotten sidings, sealed doorways, pipes heavy with condensation. Each flicker felt like someone breathing just out of sight. Harper let it in, the knowledge that whole lives had been built behind those walls. People carving out survival in places most commuters speed past without seeing. She thought about Rose's hand shaking as she held the baby earlier, the way she leaned in so close you could almost hear decades folding closed. She thought about the woman in the long coat, watching from shadow, trusting and testing them all at once. And she thought about her own choices, the report written with care, the decision to let some truths stay quiet. It went against the neat order of her job, but something older than policy had guided her. The train slowed, and the lights dimmed again for a signal pause. Harper rose and crossed the empty car, boots echoing a way that made her feel briefly like an intruder. At the rear door she stood and looked through the grimy glass at the track curving away, slick and dark. She slipped the medallion out just enough to see its scratched face catch the car's pale light. The etched lines looked alive now that she understood them. Not just scratches, but a path. Doors, safe turns, names like hidden lanterns. She whispered, half without thinking, the words Rose had said, Mi cielo, my sky, a gift spoken over a sleeping child, and somehow over her too. She tucked the brass back, palm warm around it. When the train lurched forward, she swayed easily, body knowing the rhythm from years of patrol, but feeling it different tonight. Less like machinery, more like heartbeat. She let the city pass in black corridors and sudden lit mouths of abandoned stations. Somewhere back there were rooms with water cans and chalk marks, rooms that might never be found. She didn't want to find them tonight. It was enough to know they existed. As the car climbed toward daylight, she imagined the woman again, coat hem whispering along steel, courage braided with fear. Harper couldn't promise the world above would be gentle, but maybe it could be less blind. That was all she could offer. The train broke into the station where her car waited. She stayed seated a moment longer, listening to the brakes sigh, to the faint echo of her own breath. Gratitude surprised her, not triumph, not closure. Just the quiet thanks of having been left far enough inside another life to see its shape and choose not to crush it. She rose at last and stepped out into the thin, cold air of the platform. Before climbing the stairs, she touched the medallion once more, not for luck but for recognition. Then she walked up into the city's noise, coat collar high, carried with her the map of care she'd been shown and the resolve to honor it in ways a report never could.